We'll go ahead and call the meeting with roll call.
Chair Sanders,
Here.
Vice Chair Hibbard,
Here.
Committee Member Keller, Holt,
Here.
Prince,
Here.
Roland,
Here.
Louis,
Here.
and Tobias.
Here.
I'll wait for your review and motion for the minutes.
Chairman, I move approval of the minutes.
Was that Mr. Tobias? Was that you? Yep.
Yes, correct.
All right, we have a motion. Second. All approved?
Aye.
Aye.
If I can do a roll call vote, please.
Sure.
Yes.
Committee Member, Chair Sanders,
Yeah. Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard, Committee Member Keller, Holt,
Yes.
Prince,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Yes.
Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Keller absent.
Great. At this time, we'll open up the floor, the mic, the podium there at the bottom for public comment. Just a favor, no April Fool's jokes today. So at this time, if there's anybody, have you received any cards?
We have received 4 speaker cards, 3 during public comments, and 1 reserving comments for item D, 4D.
And who will that be?
First public speaker is Curtis Bingham.
Julie, who is the member of the community that will be commenting after 4?
Troy Hightower.
Yes, I be Curtis James Bingham Sr., servant of our Lord and Savior God Almighty Jesus Christ, who truly is the unbegotten Son of a Holy Heavenly Father God Almighty. I'd like to also tell the blessed Oversight Committee, you guys some blessed individuals because you have the opportunity of working with honorable council members. And one thing that it does for you, you'll be able to run for any type of political office that you choose, and you'll be able to use this experience anywhere in California or the world, because you're blessed to be able to sit in with the successful city council now, so their success rub off on you too. So I just wanted to bless you with that as well, and thank you. And then I would also like to say, you know, the Lord tell us that the world shall end by evil. All this stuff you see, if you know the word, the world's supposed to end because of evil. And when you have a society like that, you gotta have somebody that's gonna be there to restrain it. Bakersfield Finest, they restraining this evil for us. They'll never stop it, but they restrain it and keep it off of us. You gotta be real serious when you run in a successful city, because you gotta have a foundation. And the foundation of every city is always gonna be your law enforcement. They're gonna be the wall and the foundation. Then you have the fire department. They're responsible for every single building, old and new. You know, every single one. They have to be there 24/7, 365 days a year. The Lord said a fire is something that'll never say it's enough. Thousands of people throughout California, they without homes right now because they thought their houses would never, ever burn down. Then our district attorney, you got to have them, because when these criminals come in, oh, that's the first thing they want to know. How's that district attorney over there? Can we get away with this? See, they're going to check out that system first. So that's why I'm highly a person that supports our local law enforcement. Then Romans chapter 13, the Lord called them his ministers. And you happen to be blessed with a blessed chief. And he knows what he's doing. He has a kind heart for people. And I would say that the Lord also has made him a prince. And that's something special that the Lord don't give everybody, but the Lord has given it to him the way he carries himself and go about business. So I would just like to say it's highly important for us to recognize who we are. Then I'd like to say I'm so happy for my city manager, so wise enough to put up what we saving $7 million or more. And that's a beautiful thing to finally see this staff get their blessings too. then our city attorney, you can't do nothing but jump sky high because she's already saved the city hundreds of millions of dollars. So we got to use reality and be truthful here. And look at the people that are standing there and done things. So everybody's going to get a chance at this money if you don't tie it up the wrong way, because every year that same money going to be there again. Saying you want to keep it loose. And when people do something, people always want to be kept safe. Locking doors at nighttime. Everybody you look at carrying guns now. Women can't carry purses now. Men don't want to carry wallets now. You know, it's tough out there, and it's getting worse and worse. The Lord said it before anybody here was born. It's here. So you got to take care of your law enforcement first. Got to have that fire department in there, and you got to have your district attorney on top. Then everybody else could have a good time, because the funds will be there every single year if you just don't tie it up and give it to where it's supposed to go first, and that's the law enforcement, fire, district attorney. Everybody else is going to get there to help out the groups that want to be helped. But just do it right, recognize who you are, and I'm happy again for the Oversight Committee. You blessed. You're already blessed in your own right, but now you get a chance to get in politics and go along with this finest city council board, one of the finest in the world. Not that I'm saying it. Look at their record. Look at the city. This is not an integrity check. This is a courtesy check for the people, because they have it together. And when you look at the mayor, what more can you say? You can't go to school to learn how to be a mayor, but she's acting like she can teach people how to be one. So let's be thankful for what we got. Let's thank the Lord for our chief, and let's do everything we can not to let law enforcement just have cars and guns and shiny shoes, but they need money like the criminals got it. That's why the criminals is doing what they're doing. All of us going to go home tonight. But see, crime keeps going 24/7. This thing is real. So while we got that chance, it's a miracle for the city to give you a 1% sales tax increase. We looking at a miracle here. This is not happening throughout California. But God Almighty himself liked what this council is doing. He liked the members what's going on. He has given them rest. They have earned this. Do this money right. Keep it simple. Don't tie it up. So every year you can have choices of what you're going to do. And let's take care of the number one servant first. That would be Bakersfield Finest, the fire department, district attorney. And I pray God bless you all for standing in as oversight members, doing what you're doing. It's a great blessing for you, because you're working with a tremendous council. And no matter where you go, it's going to be on your record that you served here too. So you guys got a head start on the political field now. In the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, thank everybody.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and call up our next public comment.
Michael Turnipseed.
We are going to try to limit to 3 minutes. However, that was a little bit over 5. Okay, fine.
Thank you, Curtis, for setting the standard.
Madam Chair, Michael Turnipseed. I will try to be as short as possible. I don't know if this is going to be your last night before this goes to the council or what things go, but I just want to say thank you. You've asked great questions. Hopefully tonight you can banter maybe a little more among yourselves and ask each other questions on where you want to drive this boat, because people are wondering. So with this all said, I put a lot of things in writing. I wanted to get through what I only have, hopefully 3 minutes. My biggest comments were the presentations, most of them, as far as I'm concerned, didn't have the kind of data and outcomes that we were looking for. But this is a new adventure, so I'm going to not stay here for 30 minutes asking all the questions that I would normally ask. But I do want to make some comments, especially on things that I was really concerned about. The two arenas, Torina and Kaiser, the fields, it would have been so much easier if we had a report that said, gee whiz, 15,000 kids on 25 leagues and all the people that use it. We really don't know how many people use it. There's a number, 150,000 on one of them, but when you're marketing it and when we expand it and do more, how many more leagues are we going to have? How many more kids are going to get to play? Those are the kind of questions that we need to be asking about this, is what we're going to see for our money. And for those two in particular, I did not think those questions were answered. Going to economic development, I think hiring people is putting the cart before the horse. I think first of all, the first project the city has to get up and going is their branding project. We haven't heard that mentioned anywhere. Maybe it's buried in the regular budget, but I haven't heard where they're going to fund that to promote the city. They spent a lot of money with a national firm building a new brand for Bakersfield and Kern County. So I think that could be rolled in with the new general plan, with an economic development plan, and kind of into one package and take a collective look at it and spend this year building the plan to move us forward that we can address in next years down the road. I sent everybody a link to a video on YouTube, Seattle's Dying. I just want to make sure, because again, I support the homeless investment by the city, but I want to know what partners are going to be providing what services, and what do you expect for the people who have challenges, mentally ill, drug addictions. How are you going to turn over those beds? Because if it's a temporary facility, you expect it to be turned over and used multiple times in a year, and I really didn't see where that was addressed anywhere. And then so I thought really Rabobank Theater, that was kind of the easiest for me, because I started thinking it probably has more people pass through it in the center than any other facility in town. You have the arena, you have the convention center, maybe, I don't know, 300,000, 400,000 people go through there a year. 500,000 people go through there a year. So this was easy. Those are the kind of numbers you have to have when you're trying to make that analysis. And last but not least, through this process, I hope the city develops a deferred maintenance list, not only for you, but for the council to see what's really out there that as far as spending needs to be and what needs to happen. I did see in the packet, it was added a $100,000 for a light study. Thank you. Now I just need a study for an urban trails program, and I'll go home and go to sleep and be done in less than 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed. The next speaker?
T. Daniels from the Bakersfield Senior Center.
Good evening. Greetings to Manager Tandy and our distinguished council members. My name is T. Daniels, and I'm the president of the Bakersfield Senior Center at 534th Street. I just became that golden age where I can participate, and I am truly enjoying myself. Our seniors, we offer comprehensive programs through serving meals for like 17,000 of the seniors annually, and providing biweekly food distribution to seniors and their families through the food program through the Gleaners. The center also provides services to 6,000 economically underprivileged seniors in the areas. We offer health and wellness programs, social services programs, recreational and personal support. Our center serves a diverse senior population representing 58% African American, 20% Latino, and 22 other ethnic groups. Research from the federal and state local services indicate that the number of retirees, which some of us have already made it there, dramatically will increase for the next 10 years. This primarily due to baby boomers reaching retirement age and leaving the workforce. This increase as the number of senior centers has created extraordinary challenges for nonprofit programs based on organizational provide services to the fast-growing population of our seniors. Please don't forget our seniors. We have what we share at our senior center on 4th Street. They feel that this population people have forgotten. If you all can look back and think about it, they are the pillars of our community. Some of them have been there, as we say, our oldest baby there is 98, and our youngest is 62. They have been around, they have worked diligently, hard work every day. They have kept and done their jobs well. I, along with the board of directors and staff and the key stakeholders of the Bakersfield Senior Center are actively engaged in planning to meet the needs of our seniors. However, additional financial resources are needed. The seniors we serve face health and human challenges. We thank the City of Bakersfield for its past support for the Senior Center. However, the present and future needs of our seniors far exceed our ability to provide access to the kind of health care, good nutrition, social engagement, or personal security. We ask that you all consider financial support for our community-based programs, which are specifically geared toward meeting the needs of our seniors for the past and future. We thank you, we thank you, we thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. We have one more.
Our final public speaker will be speaking during item D, 4D.
Got it. Mr. Hightower, right? Yep. With that, we'll go ahead and open with our agenda.
Good evening, committee members. Chris Hewitt, City Manager's Office. I'm going to pick up quickly where I left off last time, covering the human resources support function of the proposal. And then I do have technology information slides here if there are any questions, as we covered that last time somewhat quickly. So I will try to move quick here. Again, just a recap that these services are vital to the successful implementation of the plan that's been set before you. Human resources is, again, a very critical component of all that. They are going to be really the starting point for everything that the city is proposing with staffing, starting in recruiting and working closely with the Bakersfield Police Department and the Fire Department and all of our other departments to lay out the blueprint, essentially, of those staff members and those positions that we are looking to fill as part of this plan. So a little bit about the Human Resources Division. They've not seen any significant staffing changes since 2010. They did recently run some numbers, and they show that the number of recruitments that they are performing are up about 58% going back to 2015. We are looking at about a 10% turnover annually citywide. However, as you can imagine, generationally, we're moving, again, kind of through that bubble, so to speak, of where we're seeing several baby boomers retiring, and we're recruiting more and more staff on an annual basis. Public sector hiring is somewhat different than what you would see in the private sector, and there are various layers, and I will not get into all the detail unless you would like me to, or unless you'd like our Human Resources Manager, Ms. McGranahan, who's here tonight, to get into those details. But there are things like civil service rules, there are multi-level interviewing processes, public safety procedures that the police department and the fire department must go through before a candidate can be brought on, essentially, in filling a full-time position. And those processes are different for every position, some more than others. But what I can tell you is that those processes can be lengthy at times, and with little way of essentially going faster, although we would like to, and sometimes those rules are there for a reason, and we follow those. So again, we're proposing 126 new positions. Most of those will require a full recruitment process, meaning everything from an external recruitment, which includes advertising the position, essentially marketing the position, to getting through an interview process, which may include oral panels, background checks. The list goes on, and I'm barely scratching the surface for really what it takes from a police standpoint, but I will get to that here in a moment. So we have to make sure that our Human Resources Division has the capacity, essentially, to begin the hiring on July 1. And I said I would go over the police officer recruitment requirements, and this is really directly from our website and what we articulate to a prospective applicant for the police department. Times this by 100 or more as we move forward with the plan, and again, won't go through every bullet point, but it talks about, you know, an application all the way down to a psychological examination, medical examination. Doesn't include the academy at this point, or any of the training. But again, several steps involve human resources. I think we're anticipating, if I'm fair to say, several thousand applicants in the pool for the 100 positions that are being proposed. And so again, you can multiply that with the coordination and different work that has to go into that. So these are the 3 positions that staff is proposing. Again, this is going to, for the Human Resources Division, help their staff move forward with the recruitment of these different positions. I've provided a brief description of what each of the positions would be doing. I've also denoted for the first 2 that these positions were so very critical in nature that actually staff, through a mid-year budget process outside of Measure N, through the regular general fund budget process, did bring these 2 positions to the City Council at the mid-year budget update and requested that they be funded through the remainder of the fiscal year with general fund dollars. And that was approved by the council. So the intent, and why we're here this evening, is to transition those, if you so approve, these 3 positions essentially to Measure N dollars, because a lot of what they are going to do is deal with Measure N recruitments, and then prior to that, they will be helping prepare for those recruitments, moving positions through civil service to get the job classifications and the specifications approved, and those go through a multi-layer process that I didn't even get into here. So there's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes prior to July 1, and that's essentially what we're asking, why the positions were brought forward in a mid-year budget update, and then why they are necessary after July 1. So again, this essentially wraps up this component of the proposal. The total cost is $388,000. That does include salary and benefits, startup cost. It also includes some additional cost for required medical exams, testing materials, advertising that are going to be necessary as we move into next fiscal year, and making sure that with several of these positions, really with all of them, that we are attracting and filling them with qualified, capable, and driven individuals to join the organization and to really affect the change that staff is proposing under the plan. So with that, I will stop there, and I will open it up for questions. As I mentioned, Ms. McGranahan, our Human Resources Manager, is in the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. I will now open up to my fellow committee members for questions.
Mr. Hewitt, so how many staff are there currently in the Personnel Department, or Human Resource Department, I'm sorry? And are these positions, are they already filled? Is that what you're saying, or?
No, and I believe there are 10, with a few vacancies at the moment. No, they are not filled, these 2 positions. What I was alluding to is we have to add positions, and those positions have to be approved by the council. So what the council did was took an action to add these 2 slots to the full-time staffing complement with the intent of filling them in the current fiscal year with general fund dollars. And also with understanding that they were also here in this proposal. So we've added those positions. The council has approved that. They have not been filled. They're in the process of being filled as we speak.
One follow-up question. So are you going to actually fill them now or wait until July 1st?
The intent is for the supervisor and the analyst position, is fill those as soon as possible, because again, as I mentioned, those are going to be critical to help with the essentially the logistics of getting all the other positions where they need to be. So on July 1, if the proposal moves forward as planned, staff would essentially be able to hit the ground running and open those recruitments to get all of those other positions, the 43 police positions, the fire positions, the economic development positions, filled as quickly as possible.
If I understand you correctly, then even if for some reason you weren't to get Measure N funds for those positions, 2 of those positions have been allocated by the City Council.
Correct. Obviously not with Measure N funds, with general funds for the remainder of the fiscal year, so that roughly equates to about $15,000 is the net, difference between the time remaining in the fiscal year and what funding was necessary to be allocated. Again, and these positions are going to be chiefly dealing with Measure N positions moving forward after July 1, so that's why they are in your proposal.
But if Measure N funds weren't to be available for these 3 positions, I guess what I'm asking you is, are you going to fill those 2 positions with general funds as approved by the City Council?
I think the intent right now would be if Measure N funds were not available for the positions, at least the intent right now, I believe so, would be to continue to fund those positions because they are needed. Again, however, I would argue that a high percentage of the work that they're going to be doing is directly tied to Measure N.
Yeah. Thank you. How many supervisors do you currently have in the personnel department?
We have 1.
1? Okay. And so that 1 supervisor is approximately supervising 9 other employees? Since you have 10.
Maybe I'll have Lisa come up here and she can talk you through this.
Hi there. Good evening.
Hi.
Lisa McGranahan, HR Manager. May I ask you to repeat the question, please?
Yes. How many supervisors do you currently have in the department?
So we currently have 1 supervisor who's been in the role about 2 weeks, an interdepartment promotion, as with the majority of our division at this time is very, very new.
And how long has the department actually have had in that position 1 supervisor?
It's been a number of years. I want to say around 2009 or so, there was formerly 2 supervisors that ran the division, kind of split in half, employee relations and recruitments and things, one side of the house, retiree benefits, disciplinary measures, things like leave of absence and that kind of thing, kind of on the other half of the house. As you can imagine, with 1,500 employees, there's a lot of activity.
Is there another level of management between the supervisor and, say, the analyst?
The way the department is structured right now is supervision. So yes, we would have the analysts, which are in the private sector, kind of a generalist role, and then yes, there's a supervisor to kind of run those the assignments respectively, and then yes, and then I oversee the division in total.
Okay, I think you maybe misunderstood my question. In between the actual supervisor and the analyst position, is there another advisory or managerial level position?
No, not in between those, there are not.
Okay, so in turn, you're asking for a supervisory position along with an analyst and a clerk. So you're asking for 3 employees, but a supervisor then that will oversee 2 employees?
No, so the design right now is to have a supervisor, the current supervisor, that basically oversees the analysts, and also a lot of the front office clerk staff. So we would then split that off. So the supervisor that is in place now would specifically focus on employee relations issues, investigations, and recruitments. The new supervisor then would assume oversight over the front office in operations like leaves of absence, retiree benefits, all the benefits administration, and things like that.
So you would have 2 supervisors over 12 employees approximately?
It would be a total of 13.
13. Okay. And you've ran 1 supervisor for the last 10 years over 10 or 9 employees?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Have you looked at the possibility of outsourcing any functions that aren't core? For instance, general recruitment. Is that something that an outside company could do better and more efficiently versus staffing up? Because you're going to have to staff up, but then are you still going to need it once the big surge is over? And so one of the concerns is that we have a lot of fixed costs that get built in, and then is that needed? And then we're looking for things for people to do versus maybe outsourcing for the surge and then coming back to a core group that's more efficient and very lean.
So I'm hearing 2 parts of your question, so I'd like to answer the latter first, if that makes sense. We have looked at a variety of functions to perform outside, meaning contracting, outside recruitments, et cetera. And those are very, very expensive. And the time to educate somebody who is not an internal employee to run, just as an example of police recruitment, right? Those are 6 to 8 months in duration, very complicated. They require outside testing, purchases of outside tests and things like that, which have to be secured from post. So that's not something typically an outside recruiter would have that relationship with. In order to secure testing from post, there's a variety of steps. And I had to go through some certifications and things like that to even be able to communicate and meet those post standards. So there is not any efficiency that we could find with our regular and ongoing recruitments. I would ask you also to keep in mind that it's not just that we're recruiting for these new incoming positions, with our overturn or turnover being around 10%, and some of that 10% also being very, very complex. We are in a continuous recruitment effort, not just for new positions, but also the significant backfill that we're having to conduct on a regular basis. So to answer the second half of your question, I did look into some outsourcing with respect to recruitments. At the moment, the kind of expenses that we do spend money on like that are like those international advertisings, national advertisement, things like that. We got to do outreach into neighboring communities and states for some of those hard to fill positions. But we've not found that outsourcing, due to the complexity of civil service rules and things like that, it just isn't, it's not a model that really suits the business. And I'm sorry, what was the first part of your question? Did I capture it all? Excellent, okay.
You did.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Looks like that's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
very good, thank you.
So at this time, we'll move on to agenda item B with Mr. Fiddler.
Good evening, Chair Sanders and committee members. I'm Nick Fiddler, Public Works Director. Tonight, Public Works will be primarily provide support services for the various departments to ensure they have the facilities and equipment to meet the goals of the Bakersfield Public Safety and Vital Services measure. In addition, Public Works administers most of the capital improvement program projects through design and construction, which includes several of the projects proposed within Measure N. The first capital improvement project that Public Works is proposing is the retrofit of decorative street lighting poles with LED. The city owns and operates approximately 17,500 Cobra Head style street lights. Last year, the city replaced approximately 12,900 of those street lights with high pressure sodium Cobra Head style street lights with LED fixtures. In 2014, the city replaced 666 high pressure sodium street lights with LED. Both of these projects were replaced through a PG&E on-bill financing program, which was a 0% interest program and was paid back through electrical cost savings. The city also, in addition, city staff has converted several high-pressure sodium fixtures to LED through various capital improvement program projects and various street lighting modification projects. Public Works is now proposing a capital improvement program project to retrofit the remaining high-pressure sodium decorative street light poles with an LED. These type of fixtures were not previously allowed by the on-bill financing program, so that's why they are separate from that program. Retrofitting decorative street lighting poles with LED meets spending priority measures 5, 10, and 12. We're proposing to retrofit approximately 2,950 decorative street lights. This would result in saving approximately $131,000 annually. LED fixtures last 4 to 5 times longer than a high-pressure sodium bulb, reducing the amount of maintenance required to, and less street light outages. Street light fixtures provide a clean white light that improves the ability to distinguish colors over the high-pressure sodium fixtures, while also providing increased coverage on the street below. Having that cleaner white light allows the police officers to distinguish colors of whether the clothes people are wearing, the color of car the person is driving, not only police officers, but also the people reporting on the incident as well. Several decorative fixtures are in older, high pedestrian use areas such as Chester Avenue. A lot of the decorative street lights that we put in through various streetscape projects were all decorative high-pressure sodium. The return on investment for the conversion of this decorative streetlight fixture is approximately 7.5 years, and not taking into account any additional PG&E rate increases that will happen in future years. By converting the existing high-pressure sodium fixtures to LED, cuts out operating costs in half, frees up staff time to troubleshoot system failures due to electrical issues, and allows us to better determine where additional lights are needed when existing street lighting systems before moving into completely new systems. And I know you'd heard previously from Mr. Tackett about adding in the $100,000 study. Getting this in place first allows us to determine where additional street lights are needed before we move into that study as well. These are some of the examples of the street light fixtures that we're proposing to change. There are actually 22 different styles. This is just a handful of those, just to give you reference of what they would look like. We're actually not changing out the fixture itself. We're changing out the guts within the fixture that to a high-pressure sodium. The Public Works Department's Fleet and General Services Division will provide support services to police, fire, development service, and recreation and parks departments to meet their goals associated with the Bakersfield Public Safety and Vital Services measure. The Fleet Division is responsible for procurement, outfitting for deployment, maintenance, parts, inventory, fuel management, and disposal of all city-owned facilities and equipment. We're proposing the addition of 1 Fleet Mechanic 3, 1 Fleet Mechanic 1, and 1 Fleet Service Worker 2, and 1 Parts Inventory Specialist in our downtown facility. The Fleet Division currently maintains 1,589 vehicles and equipment assets for the city. Measure N proposes to add 96 new vehicles over the course of the next 3 years. 75 of these vehicles are police patrol vehicles. The Fleet Division operates out of 3 different facilities: the Corporation Yard, the Downtown Fleet Division, and our Green Waste facility. The downtown facility serves all the police vehicles and light equipment and vehicles that are stationed in the downtown area for buildings such as City Hall North, City Hall South Development Services, including the police department. The downtown facility is already beyond its capacity with the current amount of vehicles. Due to the additional patrol vehicles being added to the fleet, Public Works is proposing to add a swing shift at the downtown facility to accommodate the growth, decreasing downtime of equipment for maintenance and repairs, and place vehicles into service in a timely manner. In addition, we are proposing 1 new Fleet Mechanic 2 in fiscal year 1920 at the Corporation Yard to help with additional heavy equipment that will be added to the fleet through Measure N. The total cost for the Fleet Division is $384,416, which includes $382,266 for personnel and $2,100 for equipment. General Services is responsible for addressing the increased remodeling and construction of offices, living quarters, and facilities required for additional police, fire, development services staff. In addition, provide remodel of various proposed capital improvement program projects. Currently, the plant maintenance section, we're proposing 1 supervisor 2, 2 maintenance craft worker 1s, a building maintenance and HVAC section, one HVAC technician to the building maintenance and HVAC section, and then 1 electrical technician 1-2 to our electrical section. General Services is continually tasked with minor remodel projects to various facilities to accommodate growth and or reorganization to various departments. With it, a significant amount of growth and reorganization planned through Measure N, General Services is proposing to add a remodel construction section to the division. We have found that city crews can perform the work much faster and cheaper than outsourcing the work due to the need to develop plans, advertise and bid the project, and contract the work out. City crews can work off of minimal construction documents and does not require specifications to perform the work. Also, it typically takes a minimum of 6 weeks to bid a small project, and get contracts into place before a contractor can start the work. In addition, the cost of bonds, insurance, and prevailing wage for a small project tends to drive up the contractor costs. This work is currently being performed by our plant maintenance section that is also responsible for miscellaneous repairs, preventative maintenance, placement of furniture to city facilities, and the graffiti program. The total cost for the General Services Division is $662,997, which includes $426,997 for personnel and $215,000 for vehicles and equipment. Some of the projects that the General Services Division will be working on are, example, 4646 California Avenue. This is the new training facility, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and mill house modifications for the impact team, various remodels to the Bakersfield Police Department downtown headquarters, remodels to various fire stations, and various measure and capital improvement projects at Rabobank Arena and Convention Center. These are some of the examples of work completed by our General Services Division at the Rabobank Arena and Convention Center. That completes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Fiddler. Just a quick question. The amount that you're seeking is 1.1 million?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that the savings would approximately annually be 131,000?
Correct.
Okay. And then you also indicated the return on investment would then be about 7.5 years based upon those numbers?
That's correct.
Okay. Because I'm getting a different number of about 8.4 years as compared to 7.5 when I do simple division here, dividing the 1.1 by the 131,000.
Okay, sorry, I didn't do the exact math on it. I'm going off of an estimate that we worked through PG&E and our developer contractor, which they indicated that their payback would be 7.5. Obviously, our project cost isn't $1.1 million. It's a little bit less than that, but we always allow for some contingencies. So the 7.5 is what they're recommending is the payback based off of the fixtures that we're proposing to replace.
Okay. Okay.
And also there are some rebates that we are trying to go after as well that might help, that may be curbing down that 7.5 versus the 8.5 years.
Okay. Is there anything in the future plans in regards to increasing the lighting with the Bakersfield, say, bicycle or walking paths in the city as well, so that people can possibly spend more time out there in the evenings or at night and make it a little more safer by having more light?
We have studied the multi-use trail along the Kern River Parkway, if that's the one you're asking about. There are some limitations to installing street lighting within that facility because it is on top of the Kern River levee. So we're not able to put foundations and such into that structure. But we have looked at areas where we could possibly in the future that kind of come off of that levee structure to add some additional lighting.
Is that a plan, or is that
It'll probably be
a goal?
studied. It'll be studied as part of this implementation or the streetlight study that we're looking at as possible areas, because one of the primary indicators for the study is pedestrian activity.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Fiddler, on the street lighting study, do you want to talk about that now, or is that coming up?
I believe Mr. Tandy was going to, but if you don't, I can.
Yeah, the question was, are we going to look at where we're lacking streetlights based on our current standards? Because I might think the standards are low, or is it going to be where we just think, where the consultant thinks the street lighting is?
I got it, Nick. Yep. We're going to combine police records and police identification of areas which are prone to crime or their knowledge of accidents, along with traffic engineering's records on pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular accidents, and analyze where the leveraging of dollars would be the most beneficial both to crime and to safety-related issues. Streetlights, may surprise you, can cost $25,000 to $30,000 each in capital, depending upon where they are located in comparison to an electric tie and other factors. And so we want to be strategic and make sure that when we start an addition of lighting that addresses safety and crime-related concerns. So they would analyze data from the city, police department, as well as traffic engineering.
Okay. The reason I asked the question was it seems to me that a lot of areas of the city are poorly lit, not just in the old areas, but even a lot of the newer areas as well. And I guess maybe we can talk about a little bit more at the agenda item for the study, but do we incorporate, are our street lighting standards in Bakersfield lower than normal, and do we promote some kind of a dark setting, or?
No, we have a pretty robust setting. It's just that the way the city has developed over several years, our new standards require a street light about every 600 feet. The goal is to have every 600 feet on one side of the road. So you'd have a street light about every 300 feet based on one side having the street light at 300, then going another 600 feet. So they would stagger having that lighting over down the whole road. The problem with the city's development is a lot of times we've annexed in areas from the county where the county didn't have a street light standard. So there are a lot of dark spots on some of our major roadways where we've taken in these county areas, or they've been around for several years and they didn't have these street light standards. So because of the hopscotch development that has occurred in Bakersfield and expanding out very fast, we've had these areas where the street lights aren't consistent on some of these roadways. But our standards are for every 600 feet, with actually 300 feet every, as you travel down the arterial or local roadways, that's pretty standard.
Mr. Fiddler, I know that these lights that we have for the public in the roadways and they're not quite the same as the ones we might use around the house. In some of these areas, is it possible to use solar to power lights instead of worrying about electrical tie-ins and such matters?
Committee member Louie, we have used solar-powered lights in areas where we do not have the electrical connection available. So to answer your question, yes, it's possible. The problem is that the batteries for a solar-powered street light do not last all night long. They may make it to 2 a.m. So that's great for your general walking public, but it doesn't provide the safety for the street all night long. And really in the winter months, it might not even make it that long, depending on how much daylight we have, or if it's a cloudy, rainy day, they might not make it for 3-4 hours. So it's not ideal to connect it to solar because you do not have a reliable system.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll invite Mr. Tandy.
Thank you. I'm going to speak briefly, I think, on return on investment memos. The four primary departments who are proposed to benefit from the Public Safety and Vital Services measure have memos that are in the back of the thick packet you received for week 2. And they are numerics and measures on return on investment. I did not really think it was appropriate to consume your time by reading through all of them, but for the fire department, you'll find arson investigation, prospective case numbers. You will find 2-in, 2-out requirements. For the police department, you'll find numerics on how many seconds they plan to have for primary service response, and it goes on through the other departments. In addition, Rabobank Arena, where everything was capital integrated, the return on investment with their presentation. These other operations, we put it in the back of the book and have invited committee members or any others, if they see deficiencies in what we've written, if you don't think the measures are adequate, to give us feedback. Quite frankly, it is not in the norm for city governments to do return on investment calculations unless we're doing things like the energy conversion. But we were happy to put forward these proposals and invite you to comment on their content. We can continue to take comments on their content up through 1st of July. When they would really go into effect. We would begin the measures from July 1st, 19 through June 30th, 2020. Again, didn't want to sit here and read them all. They're pages and pages long. But it was an effort to get at what was requested by members of this committee, Kerntax, the chamber, others, and we're happy to accommodate those requests. In addition, there have been 2 documents that have since gone out that amplified certain of the specific concepts and measures. There was one on open issues from last time, or questions and answers, and we integrated into that some specifics about the Mesa Marin proposal, some more specifics about the fire department staffing proposal. And then there was another document on proposals for Kerntax for Measure N, and we also provided you with a response to that, which included some more specific responses. I can get the department heads, all 6 of them, up here and walk through these memos with you. But I didn't really want to consume your time that way unless that is your request. So the invitation is open. Mr. Hewitt, you have his contact information. If you see deficiencies in the measures we're articulating and you think we missed the boat and forgot X, Y, and Z, we are happy to modify them and go on from there. You would see them again sometime after June 30th of 2020, because we would anticipate doing a full year of monitoring before we reported on it, and then would have the documents accumulated for the first year.
At this point, I'm going to just ask my committee members if there's anyone in particular that they'd like to invite up for further questions.
Mr. Tandy, I agree. Return on investment is important in some respects, but we also have to be careful. A lot of times you're dealing with quality of life issues. Those are difficult to measure. But is there any way you can feel, or you have a sense that we can measure outcomes geographically or spatially throughout the city to make sure, one of the questions I hear is to make sure the funds are used throughout the city and the different council districts. Is there any way you could see to measure that, or what? I know sometimes these things are difficult when you're dealing with quality of life issues, but.
For police and fire, clearly it is distributed throughout the city. For some of the capital outlays, we have a current situation where our sports complexes are in the northeast and southwest, primarily the large ones. And through that we get coverage, but it is true that they are kind of located on the periphery of the city, northeast and southwest. For homelessness and related issues, that is pretty much, an economic development, that is pretty much citywide and geographically balanced. Off the cuff, I can't think of anything else that would have geographic separation. Chris?
No, just to reiterate, like with the parks projects, that although they're geographically located in specific areas, we're providing opportunities for individuals throughout the community to participate, and so they do benefit the community as a whole. That's the only thing I have at.
Mr. Tandy, the question that I do have in regards to looking at the key performance indicators and trying to determine the increases that we are anticipating due to Measure N. Most of the indicators here indicate a percentage increase, and it makes it difficult, at least for me, to follow because of the fact that I don't have anything to use as far as the actuals today. For an example, when you say, or when it's said that we want to increase the percentage of employees in this department by, say, 25%, where would I find the corresponding information to indicate what the current amount of employees are, to be able to go back a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when we say those goals will be met, to look at those particular numbers? So the majority of everything in here is percentages.
Employee numbers are all in our current budget document, which is online and available. And when Mr. Hewitt gets up in a few minutes, he's going to walk you through accessing that document, so that when Measure N is put up, you'll be able to access it relatively quickly. I mean, it's 1,500 people total, about 530 in the police department, 170, I believe, in the fire department. Or we can go through it quickly or give you a memo to summarize that information.
Right. Okay. I don't think we have time to do that tonight, but maybe if I can be clear on what I'm asking here. We have a key performance indicator here for civilian, for an example. It says increase the police lab technician staffing by 50% over the next 3 years. Trying to go back to find out the current staffing for police lab technicians. And it's not only, it's through this entire performance indicator through all the pages here. So I guess what I'm asking is, to be able to analyze specifically or correctly, is it something or somewhere we can go to find out how many current?
We can modify the write-up to include the current number of staff in the cases where there are references to that.
Okay.
Be happy to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. And just for general information, and this is really for the public as well, we noticed that today, ironically enough, is the first day that the measure actually takes place, the taxation, April 1st.
Yes, and we encourage all of you to buy gifts for your relatives, friends, employees, casual acquaintances.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Yeah, and ironically enough, that leads into my statement here, where I'm reading the transparency part here of the implementation of the measure overview, that the measure does not apply to the sale of most grocery items, prescription medicines, pet food, gas, electricity, and water that is provided to most homes and businesses. And I think that's good information for the public, because I know a lot of people that I spoke with just weren't familiar with that. So,
Yes, you're right.
thank you.
The rules are very complex, and not very many people understand them.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Tandy, a little while ago you mentioned something about next year, and I want to get some insight into how this is going to go 6 months from now. The council is obviously in a couple of months going to set the 2019-2020 budget, and then when as a committee are we going to be able to look at how the allocations have been spent? I mean, mid-year, are we going to be able to do that? You mentioned something about we want to see an entire year to measure results, but what I'm saying is, wouldn't it be prudent to basically 6 months, 8 months from now, look at that money that was allocated, see how it was spent, see if there's any progress in meeting the goals that that money was allocated for?
We're happy to get the committee together. First of all, you can look at the expenses every month on the online system. And so if you want to see whether the money is being spent in accordance with what's indicated, that's available to be checked. It will show both the budget amount and the amount spent or obligated to date. With respect to performance measures and how much data will be collected in the first 6 months, we're gearing up. We indicated earlier that we put on human relations people so that we didn't have that delay. We brought forward the early expenditure list to do some vehicles and other things which would shorten the delay. But there are still going to be about 126 positions hired after July 1st, and that isn't all going to be done on July 2nd. So there will be some inherent time delays in the case of projects which require a design. You'll primarily see design monies spent and not the capital monies. In the case of homeless facilities, we're already meeting at length with the primary service providers, discussing the concepts, best practices, and related, but then we have to couple the construction of the facility with making arrangements with an operator. And so the social service providers who do these services will be impacted in the same way the city is impacted by Measure N, because you're asking them to do 40% or 30% more than they currently do, and for that they have to have board contact, they have to do analysis, they have to deliver a plan, negotiate the agreement. So you're not going to see 50% of the money spent after 6 months. We're happy to meet, go over it. That's not a problem. We're happy to meet with you should the city council make changes in anything, to brief you on what those changes were and why. We may have a mid-year budget process as well. We just went through that with city council for the regular general fund and city budget. We have the potential of savings on this project and cost overruns on that. And so there may be some adjustments that are needed 6 months into the fiscal year because of more definitive costs coming in and related. So we would meet with you after 6 months, surely, for that purpose. To the degree that we'd have service measures, we could include that, but I think 6 months expectation on this program. The police statistics are primarily based on the 3-year build-out. So you would only have a sixth of it. But we're happy to do that and keep you informed and in the loop. And then you'll be meeting again at year end on the audit and year end reports, which will contain the expenditure information in detail and the analysis from the auditor.
And will it be at that year-end meeting that we also begin to address the 2021 budget?
Probably about the same time you started this year, we would be meeting to address that budget year. We need to back it up a bit so we have time to go through it with you, put it together with those portions of the city budget you don't review for the city council, and then present to the city council in early May.
I have a question on the overall objective. Is our objective of our committee strictly to say, are the expenditures in line with Measure N? Or is the objective twofold, to say that it's in line and it's a good use of funds and alternatives and creative thinking has been looked at?
At a minimum, we ask that you validate, if you will, that the nature of the expenses are in accordance with the 13 ballot items. You are also, based upon the City Council's adopted plan for your existence, invited to comment on the expenditures in any manner that you might wish. On the first set, you chose to endorse those 3 proposals. The majority did. You have that option. If you wanted to say, you know, you were really light on X and should have paid more attention to it, or some other version, that you are at liberty to make such comments, and they'll be passed on to the City Council for their consideration.
Okay. So based on that, I have a couple of kind of internal questions for our group here. One is, I'm trying to understand, and this, I guess this is kind of a whole group here. We're really pushing to approve a whole budget. And of course, the whole idea of approving a budget before we actually have the money in the bank just conceptually makes me nervous. Because until you have it, you don't spend it. But we're making a proposal and a recommendation to City Council to approve it and spend it before we have it. As you said, Fred, today's the first day of collection. So, of course, Chris has done a good job of outlining what we expect to have collected, but we still don't have it yet. So that's just kind of a fundamental question. And then what about savings? As a city, we don't have much in the event that things go wrong. And it's not really, will the economy change? It's when the economy changes. So I think we want to be very careful about creating a budget that has a lot of fixed cost or recurring cost, because once you do that, it's very hard to ratchet down quickly in the event that something happens. And so those are kind of general concerns, I think, about, you know, is there any reason that we wouldn't want to prioritize the top 2 or 3 things, and then let's see how we do. And then talk about reserves and building those up concurrently, and then let's approve several more and send those up to City Council. Or is that beyond the scope of what we're supposed to do? Are we just supposed to say, this is in line with Measure N, they do approve, and not really get into it? Because I have an observation. The presentations were all good presentations, particularly, well, and they had a very strong government background. Now, I have an observation that I hope doesn't get me in trouble, but I'm going to share it anyway. The city leadership is at one end of the spectrum, and their customers are at the other. City leadership thinks they are very good at what they do. And having watched for a while, I think in many respects, there is that element. The customer has a much different perspective. The customer, from what I hear, does not think that. And there's a couple of things specifically that I still scratch my head from the presentations last week, and I think, really? I'd be hard-pressed to look at it in that perspective. And so that's why I'm asking what our goal is. Because are most of the things that we've seen in line with the objectives of Measure N? Yes. Or do we have a good, clear outline and plan about how to implement it? On some things, but not that many. I think there's a big room for improvement, and I thought the overall goal of this committee was to bring together the best ideas in government and the best ideas from private sector. So I have had one detailed, one sort of detailed conversation about government with department heads. And in both instances, I was told, I just don't understand government. I think you're right, I don't. At the same time, that's also where the opportunity is. I'm here to learn about government and the restrictions, and I would hope that the department heads are here to learn about private investment and private practices and outsourcing and maybe different ways of looking at things. And that's where the opportunity is for our community, is to bring those two thoughts together. So I personally am not comfortable with approving or saying that this is a good plan, because I don't think we've vetted it enough. I think we've made the first step, but to say, here's the plan and let's go forward, whoa, hold on. So I may be on an island. I may be the only one that thinks this, but I haven't seen when the customers or the taxpayers ask me at a charity event like just happened on Saturday, I couldn't tell them with a straight face that we are being prudent with their dollars. I think we have some good ideas on the table, but I certainly don't think the plans are vented out and that we've taken the best ideas in private and the best ideas in government and put those together. I think that's where the opportunity is. And so that's kind of where my question is, Alan, is there's this push to get this budget assigned and approved, but I'm not sure we're there, unless it's just to say, yes, these categories do fit into Measure N.
All right, I'll try to comment. You covered quite a few topics. I don't think I'm going to get them all. These priorities weren't established by the city staff. The priorities came directly out of polling, the citizens of Bakersfield, the 30-some community outreach meetings we met on and got feedback from, the discussions with Kern Tax, the Chamber of Commerce, Board of Realtors, Hispanic Chamber. I believe there were 7 organizations that endorsed the measure, usually based on qualifications, such as having this committee and going through the audit procedure, having access publicly to the expenditure plan during the year. Are all of these items, so in December, the election was declared, and we found out that a loser became a winner, and we have had between then and now to identify the details of an expenditure plan and outline of the projects and programs that exist. Now, does that mean we have pinned down the exact service provider for the bridge housing project, the location of that? Do we have the contracts in hand with that service provider? No. We've met with the 3 or 4 primary parties in town who do that work. We have had concept discussions. We are in harmony with the general nature of what has to be done. But that's not all done. That's going to take a full year before all of that is done and articulated and clear and placed into contract form. And I would characterize your views and your involvement as being, are these good priorities? Are these positive activities that will further and advance the community in terms of the things that were provided for under the ballot as priorities? You're not the city council. You're not going to vote on the contract with service provider X, who will provide the medical services to the bridge housing project. The city council will do that. We are happy to talk about privatization and adoption of good governmental practices, because we're very proud of what we have privatized and what we do, and we are advanced in comparison to most other jurisdictions in that regard. Again, in the end, this committee is not the one who will direct us to privatize the Parks Department and displace union/civil service. That isn't your province. Your province is really, will the community be better off? Will the concerns expressed by the public be advanced and addressed in large part by this expenditure plan? Or do you think that 1 or 2 or 3 of the programs should be supplemented or reduced in order to achieve those objectives? That's probably the best
So
answer
that's
I can provide.
that's a much simpler decision, I think. At the same time, I think, again, I come back to the opportunity. I thought the nexus of the committee was, again, to provide a great opportunity for the city as a whole to blend these theories. And so, and maybe that's what can occur over time, but what you're really asking us to do tonight is not really to comment on whether or not there's efficient practices or anything else. It's just on, do these projects fit within the scope of Measure N? Yes or no? Is that correct?
As indicated, with the qualification that you're also at liberty to say, you were light on this, you were heavy on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Along those lines, Mr. Tandy, so what would be the best way for us to do that, as far as if we have thoughts on light here or more here? Do we have to come to a consensus or majority on the board?
Well,
this might be more for
I'm
Bill.
surprised the city attorney has been so tolerant, because we are out of sequence on the agenda. And just because of the Brown Act, it would be good if we got down to item 5, which is that topic. It should only take a few minutes.
Very good.
And then we're happy to go there.
Thank you.
We are, I think, if the questions about the return on investment are done, on item 4D, the proposed amendments.
Do you gentlemen have any more questions on item C, return on investment? Nope. Seeing none, we'll move on to item D.
Thank you. With apologies, because I told you on at least 2 occasions we would try not to present new things to you and then ask for action that night. These 3 are exceptions. In part, they evolved out of committee and/or other agencies' comments, and in some cases they resulted as an internal discussion after presentations to this committee. So the first one is, several people commented that additional street lighting in town was necessary and desirable and a public safety issue. We had been in a mode of getting our current lighting converted for the energy savings to have funding to do that, but we also are in agreement that it is a public safety issue and a policing issue, and so would like to do an analysis, again, as I mentioned earlier, both of police records and documents and of traffic accidents and pedestrian and bicycle accidents by a professional consultant who would identify where these areas are, where, whether you call it, I mean, at $30,000 a copy, 100 streetlights is $3 million, so it's not, and then you pay for the energy forever, so it's not inexpensive. So we would like to be sure that we start where we'll get the highest impact on safety and police-related issues, and we believe this study would further that and give us a list to bring back next year with a detailed proposal of where the best impact could be received for how many ever dollars there might be available for that. The second one was, we had mentioned that the police service garage, which is right across from this building at the back of the police lot, it's usually secured, so you probably have never been in there or seen it, but it is a metal building back there. The first year for the expansion in the police car numbers, we're handling with a swing shift addition. The second year, we're going to have to physically expand the building. And we realized that if we don't get it designed this year, that it will take potentially 2 years. So we're asking for $30,000 for design. The next one was a product also of some comments and discussion with this committee and then follow up in the staff. At Spectrum Amphitheater, the lower tier of seating is done in folding chairs that are rented and tied together, as Mr. Eckerson discussed. The first proposal we brought before you did 750 wide stadium-style chairs to replace those, both to reduce the setup teardown costs and to increase the comfort level and therefore the potential of increasing attendance at our facilities. The second tier in that seating configuration are some green metal bench seats, which Mr. Eckerson characterized as being the last thing to sell at events. People actually prefer to go sit on the grass behind it as opposed to sitting in those green metal chairs. We should have brought one in so you could try it out. I don't know why they're so terribly uncomfortable, but they are. And we realized in subsequent discussions, and in fact in terms of booking some artists and dealing with the issue of what their demands are and how we cover those demands with the event's revenues, that we needed more than 750 quality seats. We needed at least 1,500. And so we would replace the first half of the green bench seats with stadium-style seats that are wide, and that would give 1,500 seats. Artists are particular, and they don't like the appearance of an empty crowd, and leaving a gap in what people tend to lease causes them distress. As well as damaging the economy of the event and the return. And so on reflection, we're proposing another $97,500 to go to 1,500 quality seats, replace half of the green bench seats. In future years, we will monitor the sales and could return with the replacement of the rest of them, but wanted to start here and move on. The total addition to the budget from the unexpended monies is $227,500. And the unallocated monies would therefore drop from $1,506,000 to $1,278,000, which is still available for additional if you feel priority X was treated lightly and should have been addressed with more resources or things of that kind, or for contingencies that arise during the year. So that is it. We have, in the next item, incorporated those 3 items into the revised budget proposal. So when you discuss the overall priorities, you will be discussing these inclusive. And Mr. Eckerson, the police chief, and the Public Works Director will be available for additional comments.
Thank you, Mr. Tandy. It may sound silly, but before we ask up Mr. Hightower, replacing all these seats at the Spectrum Theater, again, it might sound silly, but have these new chairs been tried out by multiple people to make sure that they're comfortable?
They will. Where are you hiding, Steve? Come on.
We definitely don't want to make the same mistake and spend thousands of dollars on uncomfortable chairs.
We do not. And the private sector, Mr. Eckerson with Anshu's Entertainment Group, is held accountable.
You're bailing out on me. So I have not personally tried these seats, but these are seats that are in other amphitheaters. And I can assure you they've been well tested. But we can certainly get a sample of, and it's what we would do anyway. There are multiple vendors. So we will be getting samples of different chairs and make sure that they fit the need. And they won't be green, they'll be a lighter color, which will react better in the sun.
Thank you for that answer. Before you leave, I'm just going to open this up to my committee members if
Sure.
they have any questions for you since you're at the podium.
Mr. Erickson, good evening. My first question to you is in regards to the venue there at the amphitheater. Approximately how many concerts did you have or are you having there annually?
We have had between 5 and 7 annually.
Okay.
And our goal. Certainly. And it's a very good point, thank you. And it's used more than that 5 to 7 times. There's our 4th of July celebration. There's an Easter service. There's been a gospel fest that has been put aside for at least 1 year. So it probably gets, and then there's the movies in the park and those types of things as well.
Okay.
But I believe your question was.
Right. Well, the presentation was
Yes.
was specifically geared towards concerts, and that was the reason why we needed to have these additional seats or seating.
Right, and there's two goals here. One is to not only increase the number of tickets we sell to concerts, but also to grow that number of concerts.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the some of the feedback that I've received that from either local producers or local promoters is the fact that they feel as if the amphitheater is cost prohibitive to bring any concerts or bring any events due to the fact that the overhead costs to do that, it makes it not prohibitive to do so. And because this is a city owned venue, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No different than the arena and the theater.
And so from your feedback, possibly that you've had, can you think of a reason why we haven't seen more venues out there or more concerts out there? Because it's a nice venue, great place to have them, but it just seems pretty scarce, the amount of concerts we have.
There are some booking challenges, including the July and August and September timeframes. And the artists that play there, we've never had a negative comment from them. One of the challenges we have are the number of dressing rooms. We have to rent RVs, and so it sometimes precludes us from having, a show with 4 or 5 artists. There's several challenges, and it might be appropriate for you and I to have a conversation outside of this forum and some of those things, which I'd be happy to do. One of the goals, and my goal here with AEG and working for the city, is to increase that number, which we are working very hard to do. There are some challenges. I don't believe that one of the challenges is necessarily the costs. There are roughly $5,000 worth of costs related to rentals that you wouldn't necessarily get, say, at the Rabobank Theater. But we make the venue very affordable to any promoter. I don't think that necessarily has led us to not book more shows. That's not an issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I had a question regarding the additional seating that you're asking for. Are those going to be the same seats, or is it proposed that they be the same seats that you're going to put in the front section? The exact same seats? Are they this, you know, the
Yes, no, I totally understand. That is the plan, to be the same size. We've kicked around the idea of the first section, which is 5 rows, maybe being a more of a padded seat, but remember, we're outside in the elements, and I'm not sure that would suit us. That is an option that we could certainly look at, not the plan today.
Okay.
But if you're recommending that,
I actually had
very
that
happy
I
to-
had that same thought. No, I
Okay.
really did, actually, and that was that I want the events to be affordable for everybody. I understand that. But I hope that you looked at the possibility of making a luxury seating section in the first part and charging more for those seats and thereby recovering the cost of those seats. I realize that a luxury seat's also going to take up a little bit more room, so you're not going to be able to have as many seats if you do that, probably, as you would with the seats that you've selected right now. But I think that that's something that should be looked at as 2 different types of seats, the first section being a little more.
And I appreciate that. I don't know that they're necessarily going to be wider, but they will be a luxury type suite. We're also looking at a VIP experience, which would include not only those seats, but an area off to the side where those folks can have their own bar, a tent to go into, those types of experiences that we tried once last year, and we're going to expand upon that. I don't mean to get beyond the scope here, so.
And am I to understand that we're only going to replace half of the benches that are there now, or the hard seats that are there now in this first phase?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the thought is let's be prudent and make sure we're selling them and it's working, and then come back and ask for more.
I think the committee chair's comment about let's put our rear in those seats before we buy them is a great one.
Okay.
Mr. Eckerson, since we're all maligning the green bench seating, my guess is that the reason we got those is because they'll stand up to the weather and the abuse. Do we have an estimate what the useful life of these seats would be sitting out in the weather and being subjected to usage by people?
It's not something I could quote on, but I can assure you that whatever we purchase will be of a quality that will last as long as any item out there. And I can't speak to why the benches, because I wasn't here, but I think you're probably right. They're designed to withstand just about anything. And maybe that's why they're not very comfortable.
Probably so. I did have another question. In looking at the return on investment analysis spreadsheet that was given to us, at the bottom where it shows the revenue calculator, we're talking about adding 750 seats, just 750 more to the original 750. But with this analysis on the additional expenditure of the unallocated funds, in the first year in 2020, it's estimated the number of increased tickets per show at 35.
Right.
Just on its surface, I think somebody would say, we're putting in 750 seats, and we're going to sell 35 more tickets. That number just doesn't, the fraction is really tiny, and it just doesn't seem like it would seem to make sense.
Well, first of all, we're being very conservative, and also you're going to have to educate the public as to these new seats, and that's not going to necessarily happen overnight. And so I'm being conservative in that estimate of potentially 35 additional tickets to these shows.
Okay.
Now, I like what you're saying. Okay, it would be really nice to have these new seats and everybody, gets excited. But like anything, I think it's gonna take a little time.
Okay, I'm just saying, on the
Yeah,
surface,
no,
if you compare the two numbers, it just, any member of the public who's not sitting here thinking and listening to the entire presentation and all would sit and say, 35 tickets, even if it was 100 tickets, at 750, that's, you know.
Well, these aren't, remember, these aren't
No,
additional
true,
seats,
but
yes.
just getting these seats in and only having that much of a return of 35 more tickets just doesn't, the numbers just don't match.
I don't want to stand up here, 2 years from now and have projected 500 more seats and have you be unhappy with me. So I'm just being conservative. But I do really appreciate that, because when I did the math and I thought about it, that crossed my mind. I'm going to present 35 additional seats, and what is that going to look like? And so I understand your point, and it's well taken.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions for Mr. Eckerson, we'll have Mr. Hightower come up for his comment.
Okay, thank you.
And don't go too far, though. We may have more questions for you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, city staff. My name is Troy Hightower. I'm an independent consultant here in town. I want to make some general statements about this process. I've been paying attention, and I'm quite impressed by the comments and questions that the committee members are raising. Of course, I have more specific interests in economic community development. Another overall comment is I think there should be more looked into the future years, some kind of estimates. It seems this proposed budget is all mainly one-time things for 1 year. But I do have more specific comments about the street lighting study. I'm pleased to see that street lighting has been elevated in just the last few weeks, excuse me. As far as the study itself, I think the scope should be increased from what staff is recommending, just basically looking at incidents or past criminal activities as locations for streetlights. I think the effort should be citywide to look at where it's dark, communities that are dark, as well as some effort to get input from the community groups where they think street lighting would be more appropriate. And another thing on the study area would be the time frame. Typically, the results may not be in for a year, and after review, it could be 2 years before we're looking at where we could locate new streetlights. So I'd like to make a recommendation that the committee and the city consider funding the existing streetlight programs that Mr. Fiddler was talking about, in addition to just replacing bulbs. But I'm sure they have a list of where they think new street lighting can go, as well as street lighting that doesn't meet those 600 and 300-foot requirements. I am concerned about the outcomes, and I am concerned about this rapid pace to spend new money. That is a serious concern. And about the outcomes, there was a comment made about having the results geographic. I would support that. Because I support the economic opportunity areas, I think those graphic areas would be a good way to measure results. If we could get the results in those areas, then we could see what's working where and what's not. And with that concludes my comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments, questions?
Mr. Hewitt? Do we even have a plan if somebody dropped $1 million in your lap right now and said, go put some new street lights out? I don't think we even know where to put them, do we?
We can use intuition and practical experience. Given the costs I mentioned, though, it seemed like an analysis of safety issues and ramping up from that was the more prudent course.
And I agree. One question, though, about the cost in these analyses that we're going to do. How do we arrive at a figure of $100,000 to do a study? I mean, do you have experience in that area? Then we know that roughly that's what it's going to cost, or we pick a figure out of the sky? What do we do?
We've done a number of studies of that kind, and when you're talking about Then analysis of police incidents and police records coupled with traffic incidents. Those are voluminous. The data associated with that is voluminous and time-consuming. Then we would anticipate they would go out and do field looks, probably do some cost estimating. The cost I gave you varies greatly with the location of electricity and the proximity to other lights or not. And so there would be a great many man-hours in it before it was done, given that scope of work.
Just to follow up, Alan, if you don't mind. In regards to the lighting, will there also be considered in the study, say, street crossing lighting as well?
Yes, we have done some studies on pedestrian and bicycle safety because of negative statistics we are cognizant of. And so those studies, which tend to be more, you need a pedestrian crossing signal on Union Avenue at X Street or that kind of thing. This would be a supplement to it and an addition to it. Yes.
Thank you. Different question on the street lighting study. Obviously, it's much more expensive to come in and, add street lights later, which is what we're proposing to do. My opinion I would strongly urge that we look at our development standards as part of that study to make sure we're not leaving some areas dark. I noticed on the study the city had done on pedestrian and bicycle accidents, they weren't all in the older parts of town and, the infill areas. Many of them were out in what we would consider newer development areas. And so I think there might be some blind spots in our standards. And I think, obviously it'd be much less expensive to make sure the new development is getting the lights in ahead of time than filling it in, later with measure and tax money, so.
As much as possible to be oriented to safety. Thank you. Jenny.
Thank you. Mr. Tandy, can you refresh, how often will the CDTFA send funds? What's the timing of the tax revenue to the city?
Mr. Smith?
Nelson Smith, Finance Director. Chairman Louie, the city will receive tax revenues monthly. The calculation is done on a quarterly basis. The first 2 months are estimates we receive, and then the third month is a kind of a makeup payment that equals the quarterly amount they've collected.
Okay, and when the CDTFA sends these funds, can they provide, or do they provide a breakout of the sales tax collected each quarter? Like, can we tell what activities have increased, decreased, or whatnot in relation to the sales tax?
The state will give us details, and we have a sales tax consultant under contract who can provide that level of detail by doing the analysis of the state data each quarter. So we can receive information by industry, whether it's new car sales or department stores or, where the revenues are coming from.
Okay, and I think the last one I have for now is, this is probably more for, you probably want to hand this off to Mr. Tandy. What happens if the projections for fourth quarter of 2018, 2019, or the full year of 2019, 2020 are not met? Can we tell what statistics did not bear out, and if we don't get the money, how will the allocations change per department?
I should mention that we already, of course, have a very long-term history of what we receive from the 1 cent. We currently are rebated from the 7 1/4. There's only really one difference in, and Nelson may want to add to this, there's only really one difference between the amount that we receive historically and this, and that is a thing called a county pool, where certain sales that occur that are attributed to regional facilities are aggregated and reimbursed to jurisdictions, not based on a point of sale, but spread through all the jurisdictions in the county. Our sales tax consultant and we have analyzed how much that is. So we're really dealing with trends that we have been projecting for ever. We have never been wildly out of sync with the projections that arrive. I can think of the worst case was probably in about 2008 when the recession hit, and we did have a pretty deep cut at that time in sales tax receipts. The city council met at mid-year and cut expenditures, which is exactly what would happen here in the event of another great recession and a significant shift in the projections. I can also tell you that always every year, since I've been here, which is 27, our year-end budget has been better off than it was projected to be in the budget document, because we project revenues conservatively on the low side and expenditures conservatively on the high side, and when reality takes place, we always wind up with a year-end surplus. So I don't expect that to change or to be different in this case, and because it's essentially the same as the historic sales tax with this one exception, I'm not concerned, but we also have had state captures where the state took our revenue streams in mid-year or played with the rules of sales tax collection. And in those years, we had the city council meet at mid-year and we adjusted our expenditures in accordance with the actual circumstances, and that would be what would occur again.
Okay, thank you. So based upon our experience since 2008 and the recession, as committee member Hibbert had mentioned, if we install costs now that kind of become fixed costs, increased costs, and the economy does turn down again, we've already seen now in the past few years when the economy is not going down, an increase in homelessness and the additional impact upon the city, the Parks Department, the Police Department, and all in terms of crime and enforcement and whatnot. If we get a further increase in homelessness and whatnot, tightening down the budget for the other departments, Ms. Kitchen's department, where we're trying to now ramp up for the homeless numbers we have, we may not be able to make the same sort of cuts as the thought that we did in the past, where the other departments took quite a bit of a hit or of a freeze, and the police department, rightfully so, didn't take as much of an impact.
Mr. Hewitt is anxiously awaiting an ability to make a wrap-up presentation which deals with some of these issues. but we just looked at the numbers. Next year's budget, as proposed, between salaries and operating costs, constitutes 30% of the entirety of the spending. The balance is major capital outlays and large-scale expenses, not things that are ongoing. Mr. Hewitt is also going to present a 3-year projection of where those numbers will be at the end of all your terms of office, or sentences, as you may think, be thinking of it as we move along. And so I think if you'll let him go, we may take care of some of these questions in that presentation.
All right, well, why don't we do that then? And normally I'd want to take a break right about now, but I am trying to plow through. If any of you gentlemen would need to use the restroom, I just ask that you go and come back quickly, if that's okay, without taking a full break. All right, let's do that. Mr. Hewitt, go ahead. Thank you.
Well, good evening once again. And again, this presentation will hopefully be on my end relatively short, if I could get the presentation up on the screen. Thank you. So you've seen most of this information before, so I won't get into too much detail other than to point out some of the changes as we talked about this evening in regards to the implementation plan that's before you for consideration. So today, yes, is the first day in which the new measure is effective within the city of Bakersfield. We've talked about a plan that covers 5 fiscal quarters, 1 in the current year and then 4 in next fiscal year. We've talked about the fact that we've revised our revenue estimate, as Mr. Tandy mentioned, to $58 million in the next fiscal year. And we've talked about the 13 priorities in which we believe that these expenditures and allocations align to. And we've also talked about our opportunity here to essentially take a new look at the way we're approaching services and programs. And we believe that the plans that are before you this evening do just that. It's not status quo. We've listed the priorities so many times that we thought we would take another approach, and so this is what's up on the measure and website. If you've been there on the city webpage, it's a kind of a graphic representation of the 13 different priorities. I won't go over it with you, but there, of course, is our economic development and public safety tinge on the graphic. But again, all of the proposals that have been before you from a staff perspective align with one or more of these priorities. 126 new positions, I mentioned that earlier, is what is proposed for next fiscal year, including the first of 3-year phasing to get to 100 new officers, which is 43 in the next fiscal year. Of course, that also includes 25 civilian staff members to support those sworn positions. 11 fire department positions, as you received some clarification on the need for staffing in that department to maintain the Class 2 fire rating. The fire chief is here this evening in case you do have any more questions. 7-day-a-week rapid response teams, both to address homelessness issues throughout the community, as well as to get into the parks and be able to bring those issues within the parks up to standard in quicker time than what's being done now, which again then frees up the staff that is working on all those streetscapes and medians that are outside neighborhoods and along our key corridors, and keeping those up to snuff, so to speak, at a little bit higher standard, a lot higher standard, unfortunately, than they are right now. Economic development, Ms. Kitchen covered her plan to utilize comprehensive marketing strategies to really put the city front and center in the minds of businesses, to relocate, locate, stay within the city of Bakersfield, partnering with regional agencies, but again, having that focus here directly on the city and having programs that back up those marketing strategies, including incentive programs, urban renewal programs, and looking for ways we can change the way we do business, including moving to an all-online e-permitting system, which our planning and our building staff, along with several other departments, will be involved in to move development through the various stages in an expedited manner, in a comprehensive kind of linear manner, more so than it is today. Homelessness, I won't spend too much time. We heard Ms. Kitchen talk about plans for bridge housing, more long-term housing, and frontline services. Those are three areas where we feel that these resources can have the most impact in the quickest amount of time. Energy efficiencies, again, Mr. Fidler talked about that tonight, and Mr. Eckerson also talked about some of those facility upgrades that we want to make to some of our most attended facilities, and those facilities then go ahead and attract new events that bring new revenues into the city. So we also covered under a previous item the feedback that the staff received from both the committee and the public, and therefore that is represented in some changes we're wanting to, some additions we're wanting to make this evening to the proposals that have been presented to you. The first is that streetlight study we've been talked about being in consultation with the police department, traffic engineering, the public, to identify opportunities to do essentially what the feedback has been, which is to increase street lighting throughout the city. We would start with the study, move into implementation, and that would be the plan in 2021. The second item is the Spectrum Amphitheater Stadium seating, again, the $97,000 to begin to replace those uncomfortable green benches at a quicker pace than we are anticipating, again, based upon and largely feedback through the committee and through the public. And then we talked about that first phase to design the police department fleet garage, which is a critical backbone as a support service provider to making sure those vehicles are rolling and not in the garage and under maintenance and repair. So you've seen this slide to a certain extent before. I'm not talking tonight about the $14.4 million or $14.5 million that was approved essentially by the Oversight Committee or endorsed by the Oversight Committee and brought to the Council for approval, which it was at their meeting in March. What I'm here to talk about, again, and what we are asking for your consideration of, is the 1920 allocation, which now totals about $56.7 million. Again, this is the total amount of the proposals that are before you, including the new additions that we are asking you to consider this evening. I will just take a moment. This hasn't changed by much from last time that you had saw it, but essentially 36% of the police department, or 36%, excuse me, of the allocations are proposed to go towards the police department in line with the community priorities of addressing public safety, and additional 6% to fire. The second largest from a percentage basis is development services, and again, that umbrella covers both our homelessness programs and proposals as well as the economic development side of things, and then that quality of life component through the Recreation and Parks Department, again, including those rapid response teams, the ability to go out and reforest the city with a lot of those shrubs and plantings and vegetations that were lost over the last several years, and then the bodies to actually be able to maintain those. It's a two-pronged approach there. So I have a few more things I want to get to real quick, just a couple more items, but we'll come back to this slide in just a moment, which is essentially what the roadmap is for this evening. The first is staff believes that all of these items do align with the priorities, and therefore are requesting the committee find that they do so and bring those and move those forward to council, which would be May 8th is when the city staff kicks off the budget process, the entire budget process for next fiscal year, which this would be a component of. Again, as we've mentioned before, and as Mr. Tandy outlined, the committee may decide to make an alternative recommendation, comments to be presented to the city council in form or fashion that is suitable to the committee. This would be the appropriate time to articulate those for us to bring to staff. I want to briefly touch on something that you all received as a supplemental, essentially a referral response from last meeting, and I will cue here the overhead. This is in part, I think, based on a response to some questions that were asked throughout the evening in regards to when we look several years out, where are we from an estimation standpoint with salaries and benefits and then funding available for capital projects? And so staff went through an exercise, and Finance Director Smith and his staff put this together, and they would be happy to supplement any of the comments that I have. But essentially what we're looking at here is what we're calling year 4, which is fiscal year 22-23, and it looks at a horizon of all the different staffing that staff is proposing to enhance services. When we get out to year 4, we're looking at not only an increase in escalators in some of the costs that happen over time, as you all know, but we're also looking at an increase in revenue as well, again, based upon the several years' history that staff has, and this is a conservative estimate, so it would go from 58 million next fiscal year. We're estimating 63 million in fiscal year 22-23. So with all that being said, with the plans that are in the works as we speak, this would be the breakdown. Essentially, you would have about 24% going to salaries and benefits, much going to those public safety positions that are boots on the ground, responding to calls. Important note here that PERS, we're estimating that 6% that we're talking about today, it remains actually pretty steady throughout the next several years. And at about 6%, or about $3.6 million. We have other costs for benefits, healthcare, other types of pays that are built into labor negotiations, that sort of thing. That's at $10.1 million. Operating cost, day-to-day type cost outside of salary and benefits at about 5.7. That leaves almost half, 46%, $30.8 million for capital and major projects. Much of which all of which obviously will be aligned and brought forth to this committee first, but aligned with the measure priorities, things like implementation of additional street lighting that may be the outcome of the study, that will be the outcome of the study that will be underway. That's where those projects would have fit in. So we wanted to give you an idea of just how it would look 4 years from now. I think Mr. Tandy would tell you, and if we start looking past year 4 to year 7 to year 10, it really starts to become, as you all know, no matter the industry for the most part, really starts to become difficult, and really wouldn't be an accurate analysis, in our opinion, to start really looking at how this would pan out 10 years down the line. So we believe 4 years is really our kind of our threshold right now to be able to do that with some specificity that we are comfortable in presenting to you. One more thing that I do want to show. If I could go back to the other, please. This is just a breakdown of those operating costs that I showed you in the last slide, $35.7 million. And where excluding the capital project amount and major programs, police at about 65%, a little bit difficult to see there, fire at 13%, development services at 9%, and support services at 11%. These are just really the operating costs, the salary and benefits, and the projections out based upon the staffing proposals that have been before you and that are part of this plan. So this is a sub component of the larger $63 million that I showed you in year 4. So let me promise this is my last part before I get back to you for discussion. If I could please get the overhead here. So again, you've seen this before, and I just wanted to reiterate for both you and for the public that may be here or viewing that within about a week here is when our accounting period will close, and as you may know, the council made some decisions on that first quarter allocation to appropriate that, and then staff will be bringing back different items to the council to actually begin to acquire vehicles and the such. That will all be available through this tool. This is our open budget platform, and again, once that accounting period closes, what you'll be able to do is jump right in here, and like I said, you'll be able to explore the expenditures by fund, And so right now you'll see all the different funds that the city has, including the general fund up here on top. There will be a separate item for the public safety and vital services measure that will then kind of break down like this, and you'll be able to see, again, both, and when you start hovering, you'll be able to see both the actual year-to-date, the approved budget. You can look at it in pie form. You can look at it over time as years would theoretically go by with the measure. You could go back up here and go back several years for as far as you'd like to go, for as, from 2019 on, obviously. But that data will all be there, updated monthly for the public to see. So within about a week, we'll let you know. This will be updated, and again, it goes by when our accounting period closes and pushes all that data for the entirety of the city live. So that'll be there. And then I do want to, I won't go through it, but I do want to say that on the city's webpage, if you look at the homepage, there's a little what we call a charm bar at the bottom. There's a Bakersfield Public Safety Vital Services measure. Charm, you click on that, it's really an exhaustive web page that has all the different presentations that have been made by staff to you, as well as information on the measure itself, the priorities. It actually has a section for retailers and sellers if there are questions about implementation. And so what we've tried to do is make an exhaustive one-stop shop for the community, for the public that is interested in seeing, again, everything from presentations to meeting videos to links to budgetary data. So with that, I'm going to ask the clerk or the tech staff to go back to that last slide on my presentation, if we can. And then that's where I'll leave it for questions and comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open up for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to preface this. I want to ask the feeling and thoughts of the other committee members. I've got a concern with the fire department. It's currently in the top 1.5% of fire departments, according to the ISO, as a Class 2 fire department. But Chief Galagaza mentioned that we're only at 81%, and I think the last update that we got said that we're actually less than 81% in the report. And if we fall below 80%, then we fall into a Class 3 fire department. So it concerns me that this department is one of the, it's actually the only one that we're looking at that has that sort of benchmark against it. And in terms of the allocation of the money that we have to spend, I am just wondering if the other committee members feel that we should consider doing at least what the fire department wants, and maybe even trying to find out how we can get to 81% or over, so that we're not so close to the 80% cut line.
My thoughts are I trust the chief to come with a proposal that is going to keep us in the Tier 2 category. I think that if he had fears that we would fall into a Tier 3 category, and that he would have not hesitated to ask for more. So my inclination is to trust that what he's proposing is going to be enough to keep us in that Tier 2 category, and we can always look at it again in a year.
If I could point out, similar to the police is a 3-year program, the fire department is a 2-year program, but there is a very specific and sincere set of personnel additions and programming additions to the department in each of those 2 years. Having the capacity to add that many people and train that many people is a constraint in the fire department because they have their annual turnover, plus the addition of 23, I think it is, people over 2 years. And so the reason it was spread over 2 years was just so they could do the processing and capacity issue with the training staff they have and related. But it is fully intentioned that both years will be implemented in sequence.
I have questions on the tier 1, 2, 3, and what are the major drivers in that? And I think you made the comment, Mitch, that you trust the fire chief to be looking at that. At the same time, I'd like to know how efficient we are versus other fire departments. Because the counter to, are we giving them enough, is how do we know that we're looking at it the right way? That they're looking at it the right way? Meaning, is this an insurance deal, and what's the real impact if it slips? What's it mean to businesses in our community? Have we really looked at that? Do we know that? I don't understand what happens if it does slip down. And if we're that close to it, maybe the comment, is this enough, is a good question. But what are the major drivers? What are the things? I mean, there's going to be a weighted average. I think it's going to be insurance carriers that do it. Is that correct, Chief?
Madam Chair, Committee, Fire Chief Anthony Galageza, what happens with the ISO rating, the insurance rating, is that we are reevaluated in 3 more years. So for 3 years, we keep our 3 more years we keep our rating at the 81%. By restoring and adding to staff, it's deliberate. The things we're looking at are the things that we had lost in the past are much needed now. It's not just to gather back positions or equipment. It's because it's vitally needed at this point. Because to keep our rating up in the next 3 years, and as Mr. Tandy alluded to earlier, is that to be able to recruit and go through having the academies that quick and that in succession, it will take some time. But I know that within our 2-year phase-in, you'll see vast differences to be able to complete our rating and keep our rating. And what the ISO is based on is 50% about the fire department, which is the lower end of the rating, but then we have 40%, which is the water supply. Our water supply is actually very robust in the city of Bakersfield. And then 10% is dispatch, which is our second lowest portion of it. That's why we're asking for the additional dispatchers.
And I understand that essentially that rating affects both business and personal residents' insurance rates. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. So if it drops, it increases the insurance.
If it drops to a tier 3, then insurance companies would look at the city residents and basically consider raising their property insurance rates.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'll just summarize my question. Do you have enough, based upon what you're asking for, to move forward?
No, that's why we're phasing in at this point. And I believe over time, as we bolster up, you'll see that phase in to be able to assist with our call volume, the increasing call volume that I've explained in the past. We've gone from 25,000 calls in 2013 to now 25,000 calls is just our EMS. So as time goes on, being able to add the light engines, being able to add the additional staff and the dispatchers will keep us where we need to be, and also protect our firefighters the way it should be, but especially protect the city of Bakersfield.
I have a question, since we're on fire. Does our fire, I guess our fire department does not have paramedics on staff, is that correct, or?
We do have paramedics, but it's not for transport. We have rescue and hazardous materials paramedics.
Okay. And does?
We're able to call them out specially for a certain type of call.
Okay. But so we do everything except transport?
Yes.
As far as paramedics?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chief, there was discussion in the paperwork too about annexing county islands and whatnot. How does that impact the workload of the city fire department if we start increasing the number of residences and properties that are now within the purview of each fire station?
Well, interestingly enough, we have a joint powers agreement with the county fire, and what that does is we do have county islands that we do protect currently, and that is included into a lot of our call volume, and it is added in our call volume because we also go outside of within the metro, but within county covered areas. So we do that additionally, which helps keep, by increasing staff and increasing the equipment that we're looking at, we'll be able to keep more of those resources within their jurisdiction at that point and keep them in their district so that they can respond within quicker response times and be able to get there quickly for the residents.
And Chief, if I can add that an annexation doesn't change which station, city or county responds.
No.
So you'll have the same call.
Same call volume, yes, sir.
Afterward.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because of where we respond into.
Wayland, did he answer all your questions?
Just one more. Under the joint powers agreement, are you compensated for the calls that you make that are within the county area? Is there money that goes back and forth between the agencies, or is that just a cost that you bear currently?
The agreement does have a compensation factor, and it's quite complicated, but it takes the assessed valuation in the county where first-in response is provided by the city and vice versa, adds up the total area protected. You subtract the lower number from the higher number, and the county pays us about $6 million a year currently. We protect more of their jurisdiction than they protect of ours, and the net difference in the numerics is about a $6 million cost payment to us.
Okay, so do I understand then, if the areas are annexed, that compensation will no longer be there for those areas?
The number would improve because of the way the comparative coverage areas are measured. So if we annex county islands, the $6 million goes up a slight increment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to take this time to remind, we're doing a really great job with the open dialogue, that this is the opportunity for us to have this public dialogue in front of the public. So just encouraging everybody to ask the questions or have the dialogue that we've been meaning to have, if there is any dialogue that you've been meaning to have with each other. So, are there any more questions that you guys have for each other, for staff? Now's the time. A lot more. Jeannie, what do you think? Can we open this up for general dialogue here?
Absolutely.
Then let's do that.
Okay, this is the time for open dialogue, and I understand our role. Our role is to simply look at the proposals that you have made as city staff and say, do they meet the goals of Measure In? And if the answer to that is yes, we can also comment or say that basically we agree with them in theory. However, we believe that a certain number of dollars or more emphasis ought to be placed in a certain area and maybe less in a certain area. Am I correct? And that's pretty much what we're supposed to do.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That being said, I'm going to express to my colleagues a concern of mine is basically saving money. It looks like we have $50 million and we want to spend $50 million. And I know that in 2006, the housing bubble burst, and basically 2008, 2 years later, we had a recession. So although things are humming along economically right now for the entire country in Bakersfield, I'd like to see more of the money from Measure N set aside in reserves for any economic downturns that we might encounter in the future. So I'm going to say to my fellow committee members that that's a concern of mine, and that might be something we'd like to recommend to staff that they take another look at. Another concern of mine is the amount of money going toward the expansion of the sports complexes, in particular now the name escaped me, the Southwest Complex, the Kaiser Permanente, thank you, formerly State Farm. I do believe that the expansion of sports facilities are going to eventually bring more money to the city. It's a very simple concept, and I understand that concept. My thinking, though, is that in the very first year of this 2019 and 20 budget, do we want to allocate $8 million for a future expansion of that facility when, in fact, we might be able to do that in a year or two from now? I'm looking at the $1.5 million proposed for a study to figure out how we would expand that facility, and that seems like a lot of money as well, although I understand that you've got to have a study before you can even begin to move in that direction. I will bring up so those are things that, one thing I'd like to see the city, the staff address is saving money. The other thing is possibly putting off the expansion of the Kaiser Permanente facility. And the reason I'm not mentioning Mesa Marin, by the way, is I looked at the economics of that, and it's pretty clear that building the extra baseball diamonds at Mesa Marin would bring a return on investment in 5 years or less. We'd recover that money. So I'm good with that. I'm not so good with the $8 million expenditure, $10 million expenditure toward Kaiser Permanente in the first year of Measure N monies.
Could I, clarification or two? The amount proposed to go to the Kaiser Permanente Sports Village is $1.5 billion. Last time verbally, the detailed explanation of the breakdown of that amount was somewhat insufficient. And so we provided you with additional written detail, which you received Friday afternoon, I believe, in an email form. $800,000 of that amount is for the construction design of the next phase, which is an $8 million phase. Because of a variety of changes that have occurred in the development, the need for the specific original composition of program elements. We also had revisions proposed to the master plan, which was another $700,000. Those revisions would take design of the revised master plan to a 30% level. So if you're familiar, design development might be the term that would be used in architectural world. So I think verbally you were left with the impression last time that just to change the squares on the map and move softball fields around or whatever was the goal. But we wanted you to understand specifically there are currently 4 football fields located on what in the master plan is to be soccer. The football interest group, Golden Empire, is looking for a permanent home on properly sized and lighted facilities. We can't light the football fields and convert them to soccer at a later date without revising the lighting at substantial cost. So this is to design the football field area to be relocated, to convert for football fields to soccer fields back on the original base map, and to do the design work on the supporting parking, toilets, concessions, and related work for constructability. So just wanted to make those points.
Madam Chair, if I could, possibly for convenience sake, in your last agenda, there was an attachment that was provided to the committee. It's entitled Fiscal Year 2019-2020 Allocation Overview. And so again, if you can find that in your packet, and it totals up to the $56,491,685 that I believe staff is looking for approval on tonight. And then again, as you can see from Mr. Hewitt's PowerPoint that is left up there, the 3 amendments, of course, would be the amendments that he finished talking to you about tonight. So when you're going through that allocation overview, and if you need help finding it in your packets, just let me know and I can come up and find it for you.
Continuing, one of my other concerns has to do with feedback that I've gotten from the public, friends, relatives, people who will pay this tax, and that it addresses the quality of life in Bakersfield and the reason that they voted for this thing. It was very clear that they voted for Measure N with 2 immediate purposes in mind, which is increase public safety and address the homeless issue. One issue I don't see in any proposal is, you're going to laugh, fill in the potholes and paving the streets. I understand that we have an ongoing budget for that, but at the same time, I think that's something that would increase the quality of life and be something measurable that people in this town could immediately see, address, feel, and appreciate. And so I would like to see staff make recommendations to trim money from other areas and do additional maintenance on our streets.
I don't know whether you want me to respond to these after each speaker. In the case of streets, number one, it polled low. It wasn't very high on the citizens' concern list of needs. Secondly, several changes in the city's economic circumstances for road-related revenues are changing to the positive. The legislature passed a document called Senate Bill 1, which provides $8 million more a year for local road work, reconstruction, filling potholes, and the like. And this past week, we opened bids on the last Thomas Road Improvement Program project. That grant money that we received to do that project contained local match requirements, which were generated from 3 road-related revenues that the city has. The lion's share of it for the last 12 years has been dedicated to the match share on the TRIP program. It's been a prudent investment, because the numbers are either 80% grant, 20% local, or some of the grants are 90-10. But those are no longer needed for the match on the Thomas Road program, and those total about $20 million. So over the period of the next 2 years, we'll be receiving the $8 million from SB 1 and about $20 million in freed up road revenues, which would be converted from Thomas Road Improvement Match to local street patching, resurfacing, and related. And we felt that the $28 million more than doubles our historic investment in the street program, and we didn't need to tap Measure N for something that was funded fully from those sources.
Thank you. So I would say this has been fun, but I don't know if that's the right word, right? It's been interesting for sure. You know, thank you to staff for all the presentations and all the hard work you guys have done. And, you know, I want to do it all, right? I mean, all of it's great, but I'm kind of a simple guy, and I try to break it down like this, to kind of look through the lens as if the voter had seen this come election day, would the ones that voted for it still vote for it? And so a couple things that Mr. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Roland, that's right. So spoke about the $8 million for the 4 softball fields. So I'm kind of on the other side on that. Everyone I've pretty much talked to is really just blown away by the fact that that's even on there. There again, you know, everything is listed as priority. And so, like you said, you know, police response time, safety, top of the list, homeless second. I don't know that parks, you know, 4 softball fields rather was at the top of the list when a lot of people voted for it. So, not, like I said, not that it's not a great idea. Same thing on the money on return. The way I read that was the $2 million or so a year had more to do with the businesses making that money and not so much in the coffers of the city. So it's not a direct thing. Not, like I said, not that it's a bad idea for businesses to make more money, but was that the intent of the measure when it was passed? So I don't necessarily know that that 4 to 5 year payoff taxpayer-wise is on the table. But that being said, another issue I see on the homeless front is we've already ordered the bulldozers. Those are coming. We've got a rapid response team. They're going to be going 7 days a week. And surely that's not the answer to homelessness, right? Cleaning up the camps is not the answer. So the question is, what are we going to do with these people? And the $9 million is great. That's a great start. It's that $450,000 that I have concerns with, because by the city's own admission, that's not in their purview. They rely on outside sources to do that, and they are burdened. I mean, the numbers came out last week on what we're dealing with, and it's astronomical. And going out there and cleaning up the camps and moving these guys around is only going to make it worse. So I would, if this is our time to make comments on the record that the city council might be able to consider, that is certainly at the top of my list on one that would be on there.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyt. To keep the dialogue going, I just want to suggest that we keep our suggestions, but keep in mind that these in the end are suggestions. I think we're too far along this process to really make, you know, defined, we only give you the blessing of 2 fire trucks, et cetera, right? To really pull it apart that much. That said, I just wanted to make that note. We've all, or at least I think we've all had multiple comments from friends, community members about our role on this committee. I think we all have our own different opinions. We've stated them along the line or through these meetings. All of that we've talked about to this point have all been incredibly valid and thought through, thorough dialogue. So Mitchell, I'm just going to ask you if you have any more that let's check everybody off. Mr. Tandy, I don't think we necessarily need comments on everything. Just to keep the dialogue going, I just wanted to give this opportunity for my committee members to ask each other the questions of how they you know, see their presentation or their questions. Mitch, did you have any more? Did you have any more questions, comments for us? Mr. Prince?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to really piggyback off of 2 main things with committee member Mr. Rowland indicating the fact that some of his constituents, people that he know, what was a priority to them. Same with me. I intentionally asked quite a few people in regards to what would they like to see come out of this measure. And the majority of those on the top list was the roads, paving, the roads, safety, security, more policing, better response time. So I too would like to say to city leadership, you guys did a great job in presenting these items to us in a way that makes sense for us to understand, and hopefully based upon that, we would see some changes. I'm a firm believer in the belief that we can't afford to do the same things and expect different results. And so in turn, this is just another example of how we as a committee can express ourselves in regards to what our requirements are. One of the things that I was brought up earlier as well by committee member Hibbert was in regards to any type of reserve or monies set aside. And I do think there are benefits to the city when the city has available funding, and when it comes to ratings and ranking and financial solvency or insolvency, but in our case, solvency, what determines the financial risk of the city as well. And to have that capital set aside is also a valuable asset, I think, also for the city. It's kind of one of those things where I don't think the money is going to run away if we don't spend it as well. It's not we have to match, or if we don't use it, we lose it. It's not one of those situations. So I just think on some of these items that we'll be voting on, perhaps we need to really consider the importance of it at this present time, based upon what the community wanted to see by voting for this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few comments. Thanks to staff. Great, some nice presentations, very professionally done. Appreciate everyone's patience. So to piggyback on what some of the members have said, fiscal stability, I would wholeheartedly support a continuation of the fiscal stability we did with our first allotment for the last quarter of this year. It looks like, I think general fund reserves were around 13.1. We brought that up to, we added 12 to that, so it's about 25 now. In Mr. Nelson's memos at the time, or I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, Nelson Smith, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, I apologize. It still does not get us, the city, to the bare minimum of a 60-day reserve, which should be about 34.8, I think, based on his current numbers. He did mention kind of a 5-year plan where he would gradually increase through some interest and some savings on the PERS. You could maybe get it up to 31 million. I would highly encourage the council to adopt a policy of getting us to the 60 or maybe even a 90-day reserve, maybe within 5 years. I don't think it has to be in 1 year, but maybe use some of these Measure N monies to build our reserve. I would agree that, you know, it's not very sexy to say that we're going to build a cash reserve, but I'll tell you, it's something I would support 100%. I think our cash reserves in the city are much lower than they should be. So that's, I would agree with that. Secondly, on the parks, I think the two large regional parks are great. I want to see them get developed one day. I would like to see some balance with the neighborhood parks, maybe, if not this year, in the next couple of years. I think that's a quality of life issue for a lot of our residents, and I think that would help with the crime rate as well if we have families that want to hang out at our neighborhood parks because they're clean and have lighting and have proper play equipment. I think that helps the police officers as well on the crime rates because you have people out in the community enjoying their neighborhoods. So I'd like to see a little balance on the parks over the coming year or two where we concentrate a little bit on the neighborhood parks. On the third item, streets and potholes, that was on my list. I was just wondering, why are there no streets? I thought when this all started, I kind of thought we'd see a lot of street projects. That's kind of sometimes everyone's bread and butter. I do understand what Mr. Tandy's saying as far as some money is being freed up, so that's good news. And maybe that kind of conquers and alleviates the fears with the residents, but I'd certainly want to hear more on that. And then I appreciate the new budget item on the street lighting. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we have some older areas in town to fill in. I think that's important, but I also just looking at our standards for new development, that we make sure we're not continuing that lack of street lighting where we have to fill it in later with additional monies, and that's much more expensive, so I appreciate that. Homeless services, very important issue for the constituents I deal with and talk to, It's a complex, multi-layered onion, and I would encourage two things. Number one is that we're working very closely with the providers here in town, which it sounds like we are, but also that we're looking around for best practices throughout the state. This is a huge issue statewide, and I'm sure there's a lot of great ideas out there throughout California. And sometimes Bakersfield has a reputation of wanting to do it on their own, do it their own way. And I think in this subject matter, we really need to reach out to the rest of the state and make sure we're following best practices, because it's a complex issue. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Just to follow up to the staff, and specifically to department heads, I think that the customer, in this case the taxpayers, are looking for disruptive thinking, meaning they want you to challenge each other and take every resource you can. And so I think the ideas that are presented are good. I think the way to get there possibly has a lot of work. And I have a basic theory: the biggest room in the world is a room for improvement. So how do we start to really improve and bring private and government ideas together? Because operating in the silos that we've always done are not going to produce a different result. We're going to end up right back here because we will have spent the money in inappropriate ways. So it's kind of a concern and kind of a challenge at the same time. And I am open for ideas and discussions with any of you about how do we maximize the dollars that we have. And I think most of our members up here would also welcome that opportunity to share that in more of a informal setting. Let's go grab a sandwich and let's talk about how do we maximize the dollars and some new disruptive thinking to get our city elevated to where we all want it to be.
Anything else? That could be a question for Jeannie. I would ask Jeannie that question. Okay.
Okay, the conversation was about a proposal to, since we've thrown a lot at you and we've told you some things that we believe that, that you may have failed to address in your proposal that we would like to see, and the two main things I heard were streets and savings, reserves. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea for this committee to postpone for a week or 10 days their final vote on the approval of the proposed measure in monies, and allow staff to come back and address us at the next meeting, where we would then vote on the final approval, and maybe see if staff has made any changes or has any other recommendations.
Can I make a suggestion? Again, streets is not on the 13 items, and I personally don't believe you could find that a street proposal would be in harmony with the ballot measure. I do understand that the general public is not aware of the city's internal means of financing streets, nor are they aware that our circumstances have improved and our program will be increasing its performance.
And you're
But
right.
I do think some of the things, particularly that Mr. Tobias said, reflecting other aspects of this, it would certainly be appropriate to say that you wish to have the reserves at the $36 million level within the next 3 years. It would certainly be appropriate to indicate that in the next 3 years you are looking for balance in the regional and neighborhood parks. If those things, we'd take it as an instruction about next year's budget, that those things would become a part of it. to achieve balance and to continue to achieve those objectives, just like the police department going to 100 officers, if that helps.
And by the way, tonight's the first that we've heard of the new funds that will be available for roads, so thank you. I am encouraged by what you said, and that does somewhat address the issue.
I just wanted to say something in terms of savings. It does make sense to put money into reserves, and we did put $12 million in for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2018-2019 in the general fund reserves. And by those numbers, I believe Mr. Smith said it'd be a savings of $8.7 million over 7 years. So that would be almost $1.25 million a year in interest savings. And then we do have an unappropriated portion of this 2019-2020 of 1.278. So I don't know if it's sufficient to say that there's 4% going in every year that we're saving, or if we can maintain at least the unproportioned part of the budget, but we're at least going to get 2% from the savings in interest on the one-time CalPERS payments. Whether that's sufficient or not, I don't know. I just know that it's not necessarily good to have money sitting in the bank if we have a better use for it for operational purposes, because we have put that restraint on the departments in the past 10 years, and I don't think Chief Galagaza mentioned it, and I think both Ms. Kitchen and Ms. Hoover mentioned it. They're basing numbers on 2008, but it's not that they're trying to get the staffing levels back up to that number as an artificial benchmark. It's getting to the service that needs to be provided to the city, and whether it happens to be that same number or not, it's just where the decrease in staffing and budgets started. So by and large, yes, I agree with saving money, but I don't know that it's a priority over operational concerns.
Mr. Tandy, in that survey that you did, was saving money for the city on any of the results from the public?
No, I don't believe it was. Mr. Hewitt can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was, there were structured portions of the survey which didn't bring up that as an issue, and then there were open and focus group sections, and my guess is it didn't come up there either. Chris?
That's correct. The discussion regarding the fiscal stability in many cases, like the example with the PERS item that you had previously reviewed and approved, generally came about as an internal review and discussion. It was a discussion at all the community outreach sessions, and so those are the types of items the staff was able to look internally on and identify opportunities to save taxpayer dollars. By addressing, quote unquote, the fiscal stability. I think we also recognize that coming out of the 2008 recession and the need to build our reserves back up to an acceptable level was critical in moving the organization forward. So a part of that was, in that priority was developed out of discussions internally as well with community stakeholders.
In the interest of time, I'm just going to ask Jeannie or Mr. Tandy, is there a motion that you would like us to make tonight?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, staff is recommending that you make that motion that is in front of you on the first bullet point. If you are so inclined, I think one way you can do that is to make that motion and have a second. And if you'd like the council then to hear what some of you have heard about the priorities, I'm sure Alan would not mind having a transcript of your comments generated and sent to the council with that motion. Or we can find another option for you if that's not acceptable.
Would it be, or is it an option that this committee provide a letter to the city council on behalf of our committee with our suggestions, so that it's an official letter? We can try to get everything that we do agree on as a recommendation to the city council in one letter, so that we, at least as the committee and our responsibility to the taxpayers, can say, well, these were our recommendations according to, the top priorities, and maybe that would be, is that an option at all?
Sure.
It is. I think it would be complicated to do that because, again, under the Brown Act, you would all have to meet together as a group to form that letter. What you may want to choose to do is that allocation overview, which was on the PowerPoint and which is in your packet, either tonight or at a future meeting, you may want to come back and just take a vote on each particular line item. I think that's kind of where you're struggling. I mean, some of you want some of the line items and some of you don't want the line items. But you certainly could vote on each one of the line items, and on those line items that some of you were not particularly in favor of, you could indicate why you were not in favor of it, and those comments again would be passed on to the city council. In fact, I think you could probably do that tonight in a fairly quick fashion.
You got to put that back on the screen, Chris.
Do you, yeah, we would just take the line items that are on the projector right now?
Right, so for example, the first item on the 2019-2020 proposed allocation is Police Department, $20,362,950. You could make a motion one way or the other on that item. Those that were not in favor could indicate why you were not in favor of that, and that would be fine. Again, we would transcribe your comments to the council. Then you have the fire department allocation, same thing. You will then see on recreation and parks, there's 4 bullets underneath it. Again, one of the committee members has already indicated reservations on the Kaiser Permanente Sports Village, so I would expect you to vote against that and indicate why. And you would just take, again, each item one at a time that way.
You mentioned to the council I forgot the word.
Transcription?
Yes.
Yes.
A summary would be, I don't think they want to hear every single word that we said, correct?
Sure,
A summary of what our recommendations and objections were.
It could be a summary, it could be a minority report, however you choose to do that.
By the way, for clarification, I was completely wrong. I was looking at the $8 million in that next phase as being a 2019-20 budget proposal, so I apologize. I read that wrong. I noticed that the Mesa Marin was a 2019-20 proposal, and I just assumed that the Kaiser Permanente was as well. I'm well aware now that we're just simply asking for a $1,500,000 study to advance that.
If I could build upon what the city attorney is saying, when 2 members of the body point out an issue and the others are silent on it, we don't know how to take the silence. That's why a transcript may not be fully descriptive of the committee's views as a whole. So if you're interested in doing what the city attorney is saying, that would provide a format for more clarity, I think, if you're willing to engage in that. And again, you can add conditions for future years that you want to see the reserves built to a certain level within a time frame, and or you want to see a balance in future years between neighborhood and regional parks, which would represent kind of a compromise between yes or no, if that's the desire.
I think that it sounds like a majority of us are in favor of increased reserves. So if you don't mind, Mr. Tobias, I'd like to hear one more time what you proposed, how you propose that they advance the reserve situation, and then maybe we can make that a recommendation.
Okay, I was pointing out what Finance Director Smith had mentioned was with our addition of 12 million in the existing quarter, our general fund reserves, it brings it up to 25 million. He had cited in his memo that it still does not get us to the bare minimum of a 60-day reserve, which would be about 34.8 million. He does mention that through interest savings on PERS and then the interest on the account, if I'm correct, just leaving that in place without any additional money would get us to 31 million, right around there. So what I would suggest is we make a recommendation to the City Council that they develop a plan within the next 3 years to get to the 60-day reserve, which is 34.8 million, which is an additional $4.8 million. Or I'm sorry, additional $3.8 million.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I have a follow-up question in regards to Mr. Tobias. Is that assuming, I haven't read anything that states that the interest savings in PERS would be actually go into a savings account as compared to go back into the general fund?
My understanding was that would stay in the general fund reserve. And this is all, my motion, or my comment has to do with the general fund reserve.
Okay. Can you give me clarification on that, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, Nelson Smith, Finance Director, through the chair. The proposal in the memo was to generate the savings of a little over $1 million a year, and subject to City Council approval, that $1 million of savings each year would be added to the reserve funds so that over the 7-year period, the reserves would continue to grow. So it's subject to council approval.
So, I mean, I think there's multiple ways they can maybe get there. I'd like to keep it, I don't want to get too far down in the weeds here, but I just think it's a high priority that we at least get to that bare minimum of a 60-day operation. We're talking about a 60-day operational reserve in the general fund. At the time, it was quoted at 34.8 million.
That's correct. We spend about $17 million a month, and so a 2-month reserve would be $34 million.
Yeah. So that's what I'm getting at is, how quickly can we get there, and and what's a prudent amount of time for the council to develop that plan?
If I may, Jeannie, can we just, where would that go in one of these line items so that we can just make the motion on that line item, and then that would be our recommendation for that line item?
Madam Chair, I don't think you need a line item on that one. I'm taking Mr. Tobias that's a motion. I'm assuming you're going to make that motion in and of itself, that the committee's recommendation to the council is that they develop a plan to develop a 60-day minimum cash reserve.
Correct.
That's a motion.
That's a motion.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair, can I please do a roll call
Yes,
vote?
please.
Chair Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
Yes.
Committee Member Keller? Halt?
Yes.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Louis?
Aye.
And Tobias?
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Keller absent.
Is everyone okay that we go line item by line item? So I will wait for a motion. Start off with the first one, Police Department.
And if you wouldn't mind, the person making the motion, if you could just indicate that you make a motion that the amount that staff recommends is within the spending priorities of Measure N, and that it be approved.
I would like to make a motion that the $20,362,950 suggested by the police department is consistent with the outline within Measure N, and that it be approved.
I second that motion.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
Yes.
Committee members Keller? Holt?
Aye.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Louis?
Aye.
Tobias?
Yes.
Motion was approved with committee member Keller absent.
Next line item.
I'm sorry, but a point of clarification. The 3 items we propose to add, could we assume that your motions include those 3 items to the appropriate department? There was $30,000 more for the police department in that, for example. Is that a safe assumption?
I think I was going to recommend, Mr. Tandy, that they do that at the end.
Okay.
And just have
All right.
separate motions. So I would keep going.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we accept the fire department's recommended amount of $3,344,375, and that it is consistent with Measure N, and it is within the spending priorities of this particular measure.
I would like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
I would like to see the fire department provide city council with a benchmarking showing how we stack up against other departments, mostly in efficiency. How efficient are we versus other? Because to add the positions, again, let's just leave it at that. To understand how we stack up in efficiency so that the voters know that our fire chief and his leadership team are doing everything they can to produce an efficient product on the street that still meets the safety needs and eliminates waste.
We have a motion. We're waiting for a second.
Would, are those comments part of the motion, or would those be part of the motion?
My hope, Committee Member Tobias, is I'm going to wait and see how you vote. If Committee Member Hibbard votes no, then those comments obviously will go up in a minority report. He can vote yes and also incorporate them in.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
Yes, with the comments submitted to city council.
Committee members Keller? Holt?
Aye.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Louis?
Aye.
And Tobias?
Yes.
Motion is approved with committee member Keller absent.
Next line item, Development Services Department.
And Madam Chair, I would also suggest that with these 4 bullets, we do these separately since there were comments from the committee on that. It's Rec and Park. So the first one is the Rapid Response Team.
I skipped one.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. All right, so we'll wait for a motion on the first bullet.
I'll make a motion that we approve the rapid response team and security for $1,235,289,000 as proposed by staff.
And it is within the spending guidelines of Measure N, correct?
Thank you, Jenny. And it is within the spending guidelines of Measure N.
Thank you. I need a second.
Second the motion.
I have a question. Is the $450,000 for the third party included in that number, or is that a different line item?
That would be a part of the development services budget, not the park and recreation.
Sorry, my bad.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
Yes.
Committee members Keller? Holt?
Aye.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Louis?
Aye.
Tobias?
Yes.
Motion is approved with committee member Keller absent.
Second item is the reforestation of trees and shrubs, $1,550,000.
I make a motion that the proposed expenditure for reforestation of trees and shrubs for $1,550,000 is falls within the guidelines of Measure N and be approved.
I will second that motion.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders? Vice Chair Hibbard?
Yes.
Committee members Keller? Holt?
Aye.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Louis?
Nay.
And Tobias?
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Keller absent and Chair Sanders and Committee Member Louis voting no.
And at this time, I would just ask if either of the two oppositions had any comments that they would like incorporated up to the council.
I'll let you go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, a frequent complaint of real estate agents is that they always want to build houses and sell houses and just eat up green space. Not necessarily true in this case. I've heard complaints or comments from the public about, not specifically about the trees, but more about the shrubs and the expense that was allocated in the report for shrubs. So I think if there was a portion that I would consider cutting back on, it would be for that.
Thank you, Mr. Louis. I'm along those same sentiments. I just don't feel like, I think it was replacing 6,000 or 9,000 trees and shrubs. It shouldn't be a priority at this time. And mostly for reasons that I think a part of this particular line item, it was the drip or the sprinkler irrigation, which I think is underestimated the long-term cost of that. And yeah, I think I stated that in the last meeting. Thank you.
The next item then is the Kaiser Permanente Sports Village, $1,500,000.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move approval of the Kaiser Permanente Sports Village. This is for the master plan, correct? Yeah, master plan.
1.5 is broken down by 800,000 for the specific design of Phase 4 and the balance for the master plan.
Yes, okay. With a recommendation that the council, over the next 3 years, look at an more evenly spread the dollars from the Measure N funding to the local neighborhood parks throughout the community.
And that this 1.5
And that-
is within the
yes.
spending priorities of Measure N.
Yes, and that the 1.5 staff recommendation is within the spending recommendations in Measure N. Yes, meets the requirements. That's my motion.
I second the motion.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders?
Can I abstain? Or do you need a vote?
A vote would be better, Chair.
I vote no.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
No.
Committee members Keller? Holt?
No.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
No.
Louis?
Aye.
Tobias?
Yes.
Motion fails with committee members Prince, Louis, and Tobias voting yes, and Chair Sanders Vice Chair Hibbard, Committee Member Holt, and Roland voting no, and Committee Member Keller absent.
Same comment for those. Well, actually, in this case, since it failed, there is no comment unless you'd like to make, unless the nays would like to make one. Otherwise, we'd move on to the next item.
Just that City Council look at the best use of those funds, as I think the budgets are inflated significantly from where they need to be.
If nothing else, the next bullet is the Mason Marin Sports Complex, $7,852,000.
It's that popular, huh? I'll step out.
Janique, can I make a comment before any motion is
Sure.
actually made?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just a reminder to myself as well, we actually are, in regards to making a motion, basically our motion is based on the fact that these particular line items are a part of the request and the proposal of Measure N, regardless of whether we, at this point in time, initially, agree with the actual line item here, a proposed allocation. What we're voting on right now is whether or not this qualifies under Measure N guidelines, correct?
Well, you're actually doing both, Committee Member Prince. You're making a motion that it falls within the guidelines of Measure N, and that you're recommending that the City Council spend the money in the way that staff has presented.
Okay, at the same time?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, and just as a reminder to the committee members, if you do make the motion, remember, you may not vote against your motion. So you need to, if you're making the motion, then you need to be a yes vote.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a question. Regarding the overall annual economic impact, including the transit occupancy tax estimate of $2,085,000, that's not money that would be coming directly to the city coffers. That's the impact on the local economy, correct?
That's correct, and I will point out that what we did not do, and what any developer coming to town to promote their business would do, is multiply it times 7. Because that is pretty much the standard economic condition, that you spend $1 and you spend it in a motel. The motel owner spends it on the maid buys groceries, the grocery store buys produce from the local farmer. We did not include that in the calculation, but your question is correct.
The additional tournament and league estimated annual impact of $91,000 would come directly to the city coffers because that's money that they pay to have a tournament there, correct? Yeah.
We're still waiting on a motion.
If I don't hear a motion, then that means it's not approved. It fails by operation of law.
I'd like to make the motion that the $7,852,000 allocation for the Mason Marin Sports Complex falls within the guidelines of Measure N.
It is recommended to the council, right?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders?
Nay.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
No.
Committee Members Keller? Holt?
Nay.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes, because of the clarification offered by City Manager Tandy regarding the multiplier on the economic impact.
Louis?
Aye.
Tobias?
Yes.
Motion is approved with Chair Sanders, Vice Chair Hibbard, and Committee Member Holt voting no, and Committee Member Keller being absent.
Again, are there any comments by those voting no?
The comment would be that there may be more efficient ways to achieve the exact same result for the community by looking at whether it be a public-private partnership, a land lease, or other mechanisms for the city council to consider.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think while it is in line with one of the 13 bullet points, the way it's weighted as far as sticker shock of $8 million, I do feel that that money could have been spent elsewhere.
I agree with my two committee members here. It does fall in line with the measure and requirements. However, I feel like as just the taxpayers who, the large percentage of taxpayers who would not use the sports complex, I think would be disappointed. So thanks.
Okay, this moves us on then to the bullet points within development services. The first one is the approval of the homeless rapid response team in the amount of $795,899.
I would like to make a motion to approve the homeless rapid response team in the amount of $1,795,899, and that the request falls within the requirements of Measure N.
I'll second that motion.
So on the question, that $450,000 for the third party isn't within this one, right?
It is not.
Oh, one more, I'm sorry.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
Yes.
Committee members Keller? Holt?
Yes.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Louis?
Aye.
Tobias?
Yes.
Motion is approved with committee member Keller absent.
Next item, the highlighted projects of bridge housing and transitional housing for community development totaling $9,647,173.
And a point of clarification, the column on the left is not necessarily the entirety of the allocation to the department, it's just the highlights. So the $450,000 is contained in the $14,734,000 on the right.
So there won't be a vote on that one by itself? In one of the line items?
There's, for clarification purposes, there should be.
Yes, why don't I just indicate then that let's not have a vote on the 9 million, let's go directly to the 14 million and see how that comes out. We can always step back. So the proposed suggestion for you would be the recommendation that the $14,734,472 is within the spending guidelines of Measure N and recommended to the council.
I'd like to make the motion that the transitional housing total of $14,734,472 does fall within the guidelines of Measure N.
And is recommended to the council, correct?
And it is recommended, and it is recommended to the council.
Correct.
I will second that motion.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard?
Yes.
Committee members Keller? Holt?
Nay.
Prince?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Louis?
Aye.
And Tobias?
Yes.
Motion is approved with committee member Holt voting no and committee member Keller absent.
So I would just like the minority report to mention that I'm okay with everything except that the $450,000 for third-party administrators for the homeless, that never be expanded to meet the needs.
Okay, so then that actually takes us down to the arena and the convention center. And that would be, as you can see, the recommendation of $2,353,548 is within the spending priorities and guidelines of the measure and recommended to council.
I make the motion that the $2,353,548 allocation to the Arena Convention Center falls within the guidelines of Measure N and be approved to council.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote. Chair Sanders,
No.
Vice Chair Hibbard,
No.
Committee Member Keller, Holt,
Aye.
Prince,
No.
Roland,
No.
Louis,
Aye.
and Tobias.
Yes.
Motion fails with Chair Sanders, Vice Chair Hibbard, Prince, and Roland voting no, and Committee Member Keller absent.
Any comments by the naysayers?
Yes. Although the convention center and the arena upgrades may be necessary in the long run, I don't think they're a priority. And I don't believe that when people voted for Measure N, they had in mind painting the concourse at Rabobank Arena and the bridge.
In regards to this proposal, I did not see the need for the enhancement of the seating at the amphitheater, nor did I see the enhanced advertising display of the arena's scoreboard, nor did I see the replacement of the area's hockey dashboards and plexiglass system as an immediate need as well.
I'm in agreement with those of my colleagues. I didn't think it was a priority at this time. However, over time, I think it needs to be broken down in priority of the upgrades and maybe some creative thinking along those lines for a scoreboard to find different sponsors or donations instead of having to pay for it out of our general fund. I am a big fan of the condors, and I take my family to the Rabobank frequently throughout the year, but I just don't see it as a priority at this time.
Okay, moving on to support services. Is there anyone, just by a show of hands, that's going to vote no on either the human resources, the technology services, the fleet services, or the general services? If anyone's going to vote no, we'll take them individually. If otherwise, we can take them as a one lump sum in the 2 million. There is, okay. So let's do it individually then. On support services, human resources, $388,092 within the spending guidelines of Measure N and recommended for council. We need a motion on that, please.
Hiring over 100 personnel for the police department over the next 3 years is going to be a monumental task, and I believe that it does require a tremendous amount of effort on the part of human resources. Therefore, I recommend that the committee recommend to the City Council that the $388,092 for human resources is within the desires of Measure N.
I second the motion.
Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard,
No.
Committee Members Keller, Holt,
Aye.
Prince,
No.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Aye.
Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Vice Chair Hibbard and Committee Member Prince voting no, and Committee Member Keller absent.
In the report to City Council, I'd like to see that the staffing has really looked at other opportunities besides just hiring full-time employees to meet the same need. I didn't get the feel today from the presentation that really any other options had been looked at, and just encourage City Council to explore those other options and make sure that they've exhausted other possibilities besides just a straight-up hire.
When I looked at this in regards to the 3 positions, I did not think that a supervisor needed to be one of the 3 positions, indicating that an analyst and a clerk also would be the other 2 employees. Based on what work that they will have to do, I think there's probably more of a need for more analysts than another supervisor. So that's why I voted against it.
The next item, Technology Services, $1,023,546.
Maintaining the police department and fire department and all the other departments' technology is paramount for our officer safety. I recommend that the committee send to the City Council for a yes recommendation that Technology Services receive $1,023,546, and that amount is consistent with the priorities of Measure N.
I second the motion.
Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard,
Yes.
Committee Members Keller, Holt,
Aye.
Prince,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Aye.
Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Keller absent.
Next item, Fleet Services, $384,416.
I'd like to make the motion that the $384,416 for Fleet Services allocation falls within the guidelines of Measure N and be approved for City Council.
Second?
Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard,
No.
Committee Members Keller, Holt,
Aye.
Prince,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Aye.
and Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Vice Chair Hibbard voting no.
I would like to see City Council request an analysis on buying new versus certified used vehicles, particularly for non-police vehicles or vehicles that don't require a large modification. It just seems like that should be a good option that should be explored, and it doesn't seem as though anybody really looked at it with any diligence.
The next item is General Services, $662,997.
I'll make the motion that the $662,997 is consistent with the spending priorities within the ballot measures, and recommend to City Council.
I second the motion.
Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbard,
No.
Committee Members Holt,
Yes.
Prince,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Aye.
Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Vice Chair Hibbert voting no and Committee Member Keller being absent.
I would like to see a report go to City Council when they vote on this to really show how hiring a tenant improvement contractor can be more expensive than hiring full-time staff to do repairs. And I do get that a minor repair might be that way, but for a full tenant improvement of building offices and that, I find that hard to believe, and the fixed overhead, I think, is something we need to be careful about.
The next item is the Fiscal Stability Energy Savings Project through the Public Works Department, $1,100,000.
I would like to make a motion that the Fiscal Stability Energy Savings Project for Public Works, I would like to recommend approval of the City Council and that it meets the requirements of Measure N.
I'll second that motion.
Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbert,
Yes.
Committee Member Holt,
Aye.
Prince,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Aye.
Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Keller absent.
Okay, now we move to the proposed additional projects that were presented to you this evening, members of the committee. Again, they are contained in your administrative reports on the agenda for tonight. There are 3 items. The first one is the street lighting study in the amount of $100,000. Again, that it is within the priority spending guidelines of Measure N and recommended for City Council approval.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the street lighting for $100,000 for the study, and that it is within the guidelines, spending guidelines within Measure N, and that we recommend it to the City Council.
Second.
Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbert,
No.
Committee Member Holt,
Aye.
Prince,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Aye.
Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Vice Chair Hibbert voting no and Committee Member Keller absent.
I find it concerning that $100,000 to do the study. That just seems 5 times more than it should be, and City Council may want to look at alternative vendors to produce that study, and what's the scope of the study.
The next item is the $30,000 expansion of the police maintenance garage.
I'll make the recommendation that the police fleet maintenance garage for $30,000, that it is consistent with the spending guidelines of Measure N, and that it be recommended to City Council.
I'll second that motion.
Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hibbert,
Yes.
Committee Members Holt,
Aye.
Prince,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Louis,
Aye.
and Tobias.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Keller absent.
And the last item tonight requiring your vote is on the $97,500 amount for the Rabobank Arena, Convention Center, and Spectrum Amphitheater Stadium seating.
I'd like to make the motion that the $97,500 for the Rabobank Arena, Convention Center, and Spectrum Amphitheater Stadium seating be approved for City Council and it meets the guidelines of Measure N.
I'll second the motion.
Chair Sanders,
No.
Vice Chair Hibbard,
No.
Committee members Holt,
No.
Prince,
No.
Roland,
No.
Louis,
I,
and Tobias.
Yes.
Motion fails with Chair Sanders, Vice Chair Hibbard, Committee members Holt, Prince, and Roland voting no, and Committee member Keller absent.
Comments?
Same comments that were made for the Rabobank. A good idea, a fair payback period, not just at this first go-round, probably not the best use of funds.
Madam Chair, I have a question. It's actually for Mr. Tandy and Ms. Gennaro. For the motions that failed, what happens to those funds, those allocations? They still move forward? They just don't get the recommendation of the committee?
Correct. And then all of them obviously are up to council.
So the council could override the recommendation of this committee, or if they agree, then those funds become part of the unappropriated balance that goes in?
Yes.
Correct.
Or some mixture of them, yes, or all are yes. Mhm.
Thank you.
Jeannie, when will the city council vote on all of these?
June 28th, Friday, I believe it is, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They will begin to get presentations on the budget as a whole, inclusive of the Public Safety and Vital Services measure on May 8th. Those presentations and discussions will continue through the months of May and June.
Were there any other committee members that voted no on that last item wish to register comments for the council?
All right, so that takes us to any board comments from the committee members. In general. All right, I think everybody's pretty tired. I will just say thank you to everybody who attended tonight, who stuck through, gosh, almost 5 hours of discussion. I thought the dialogue was incredibly good and thorough. I just wanted to thank all of my committee members for your transparency and your due diligence in this process.
And if I may, on behalf of the city, I would like to thank you. You've invested a lot of time and energy and effort in this. It is appreciated, and we thank you.
Wait. For purposes of this committee being able to entertain thoughts of the citizens of the community and what they expect of us, I'd like to make a motion that the city assign a city email address to each of the committee members so that we could actually receive email comments from the public.
Committee member Roland, for a couple of reasons, we don't do that here in the city. Not even the council members have emails due to the Brown Act as well as the Public Records Act. And in addition to that, the item's not on your agenda tonight, so we can't vote on it. But perhaps the city manager and I could meet with you after, and maybe we could come up with a solution that would get you where you want to go. We can always have an administrative admin to the Oversight Committee, and I know the city clerk already receives those for the council. We can kind of incorporate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further comments?
At this point, Mr. Tandy, what is our role? Do we wait until the audit at the end of the year, the annual report and the audit, or?
I would assume you want to be advised when the city council takes action on the budget as to what the disposition was in regard to this measure and your recommendations. So we could advise you in writing. You could instruct us to come back and schedule a meeting for that purpose around that time. In addition, should there be new things that arise, should there be an idea from a council member to fund a widget machine that hasn't been discussed, we would assume we would call you back to review and comment on it as you might see fit. Should the council members wait until the evening of budget adoption, then I don't know if that would be meaningful. But if there is time for discussion, we would call you back and get your input on it. Beyond that, there may be a mid-year budget consideration in the area of January, where we will review progress to date on all the expenditure categories, whether some things are coming in low, high, whatever, and if there is an opportunity to reallocate monies based upon Project X saved $500,000, then we would call you back then for another meeting. Other than that, it would be the audit and the year-end report, which would traditionally occur, Nelson, about August or January, sorry. January.
If there are no other comments, we will call the meeting adjourned. Do we need a motion to adjourn? No, 9:05, it's adjourned. Good night.